There is a sound that echoes across centuries, a deep, resonant gong that seems to pull you from the modern world and into a realm of shadow and stone. Picture yourself standing at the entrance of a temple shrouded in morning mist, the air thick with the scent of old incense and damp earth. You look up at the massive, weathered stones, each one carved with symbols you can barely understand, and you can't help but ask yourself a single, compelling question: what truly lies behind these ancient walls? We've all seen the pictures, walked through the ruins on our travels, and heard the official histories, but the stories told by tour guides and history books are often just the surface, the polished version of a past that is far more mysterious, far more strange, and infinitely more thrilling than we've been led to believe. What if these sacred sites were not just places of quiet prayer, but epicenters of events so incredible they border on legend? Today, we're going beyond the postcard views and the well-trodden path. We are embarking on a journey into the very heart of enigma, to uncover the 25 untold myths of the world's most sacred temples. These are not just simple folktales, they are chronicles of hidden powers that could alter the fate of kingdoms, of divine curses that have followed bloodlines for generations, and of architectural secrets that defy the known capabilities of the civilizations that built them. These are the stories that were intentionally left out of the official records, whispered only in the dead of night by those who dared to remember. This is a voyage into the shadows of history, where the line between faith and fantasy blurs, and where every carved deity and silent corridor holds a secret waiting to be rediscovered. So prepare to see these hallowed grounds in a completely new light. We'll explore the temples where it is said the gods themselves once walked, uncover the truth behind the legendary guardians sworn to protect unimaginable treasures, and piece together the puzzles that have baffled scholars and treasure hunters for ages. This is not just a history lesson, it is an invitation to adventure, a chance to become part of a story much larger than ourselves. So let the journey begin as we step together through the mist and into the first of these 25 untold myths. Our journey into the unknown begins not in the deserts of Egypt or the highlands of Peru, but deep within the Cambodian jungle, at the heart of a sprawling stone metropolis that defies both time and logic. This is Angkor Wat, the world's largest religious monument, a place where myth and masonry are inseparably fused. The official history tells us of a mighty Khmer empire and a king who built this masterpiece as his celestial abode. But the first of our untold myths speaks of something far more mystical, suggesting that this entire complex was not built by human hands alone, but with the direct assistance of divine beings. The local legends are unwavering on this point. They say the god Indra himself, ruler of the heavens, commanded his divine architect Viswakarma to descend to earth and orchestrate the construction. This wasn't just divine inspiration, it was divine labor. How else, the stories ask, could such colossal sandstone blocks, some weighing many tons, have been quarried from a mountain over 50 kilometers away, transported along rivers and through dense, unforgiving jungle, and then lifted into place with a precision that stumps modern engineers? The sheer scale of the undertaking seems to belong to the realm of the gods, a notion that the ancient carvings themselves seem to endorse, depicting celestial beings overseeing the work of mortal men. And it is from this foundation of divine creation that the temple's most haunting and persistent mystery emerges, the legend of the Whispering Stones. Walk through the long, echoing galleries of Angkor Wat as the sun sets and the crowds disperse, and you'll feel a profound shift in the atmosphere. The air grows still, and the only sound is the crunch of your own footsteps on the ancient stone. But locals and a surprising number of modern visitors report something else. They speak of a faint, sibilant sound like a soft breath of wind, yet there is no breeze. It is a low, rhythmic murmur that seems to emanate not from any one direction, but from the very stones under your feet and the walls that surround you. These are not random noises, they are described as whispers, a chorus of ancient, indecipherable voices sharing secrets from a forgotten age. The phenomenon is most often reported near the intricate bas-reliefs that line the temple walls, particularly the famed churning of the Ocean of Milk gallery. This immense panel is not merely a religious story. Some researchers and mystics believe it is a complex cosmological code, a map of celestial mechanics and spiritual truths encoded in stone. The whispers, they suggest, are a key to understanding this code, an auditory guide meant only for those who are truly listening, for those whose intentions are pure and whose hearts are open. It is said that the temple itself is a living, breathing entity, and that on certain nights when the alignment of the stars mirrors its sacred geometry, it chooses to speak. One account from a French archaeologist in the early 20th century describes a night spent within the central sanctuary, where he awoke to a sound like 1,000 monks chanting in a language he had never heard, a sound that seemed to vibrate through the stone floor and into his very bones. More recently, a tourist from Germany, a self-proclaimed skeptic, recounted standing alone in a narrow corridor and hearing a clear, soft voice speak a single, incomprehensible syllable directly into his ear, a moment that left him with an unshakable feeling of peace and connection. Are these whispers merely the wind channeling through the temple's countless passages and windows, a clever, unintended acoustic effect? Or are they something more, the lingering echo of the divine breath that first gave life to this stone wonder? The myth persists because the experience, for those who claim it, is undeniably real. It challenges the very nature of how we perceive ancient sites, suggesting that Angkor Wat is not a relic of the past, but a conscious guardian of ancient wisdom, still communicating with the world, if only we are quiet enough to hear. Leaving behind the whispering stones of Angkor Wat, we travel west to the heart of the ancient world's most powerful empire, where the fate of an entire civilization rested not on an army or an emperor, but on the vigilance of a few chosen women and a single, fragile flicker of fire. In the bustling Roman Forum, amid the grand temples and basilicas, stood a relatively modest circular structure, the Temple of Vesta. Here, the second of our untold myths burns brightly, the legend of the eternal flame. This was no ordinary fire. It was believed to be the literal life force of Rome itself, a sacred flame dedicated to Vesta, goddess of the hearth, home, and family. The survival of the city, the stability of the state, and the favor of the gods all depended on one unbreakable rule: this flame must never, ever go out. The sacred duty of tending this fire fell to the Vestal Virgins, an order of priestesses chosen from Rome's most prestigious families as young girls, often between the ages of 6 and 10. Their selection was a tremendous honor, but it came at an unimaginable cost. Each Vestal took a vow of chastity for her 30 years of service, a period divided into a decade of learning, a decade of practicing the rituals, and a final decade of teaching the newcomers. Their lives were governed by a web of rules and rituals so strict that a single misstep was not just a personal failure, it was a national emergency. They prepared a special sacred mixture of water and salt for cleansing the temple, and they used only specific types of wood, carefully selected and stored, to fuel the flame. The fire itself was never allowed to be profaned by being used for common purposes like cooking or heating. Its sole reason for existence was symbolic and spiritual, a continuous beacon of Rome's vitality. The political significance of this flame cannot be overstated. In a world where religion and state were one and the same, the eternal flame was the ultimate barometer of Rome's divine standing. If the fire burned strong and steady, it signaled that the gods were pleased, that the Vestals were pure, and that Rome was secure. The flame's well-being was so intrinsically linked to the empire's fortunes that on the eve of major military campaigns or political decisions, senators and generals would often make offerings at the temple, seeking a favorable omen in the fire's unwavering light. The Vestals themselves became living symbols of the city's integrity. Their person was inviolable. They possessed privileges no other Roman women enjoyed, including the ability to own property, make a will, and pardon condemned criminals. But this immense power was balanced by a terrifying and brutal consequence for failure. If a Vestal was found to have broken her vow of chastity, the punishment was live burial, a horrifying ritual that underscored just how high the stakes were. Her supposed partner would be publicly scourged to death. The logic was chillingly simple. A Vestal's impurity corrupted the sacred flame, and a corrupted flame meant the gods had abandoned Rome, leaving it vulnerable to catastrophe. This brings us to the most haunting part of the myth, the alleged supernatural consequences that followed every single time the flame was accidentally extinguished. According to Roman historians, whenever the fire went out, the entire city was plunged into a state of panic and collective dread. It was seen not as a simple accident of a draft or damp wood, but as a dire omen of impending disaster. The event triggered an immediate and frantic investigation by the Pontifex Maximus, the chief high priest. The Vestals were scrutinized, their purity questioned. The official response was to relight the flame using the most primitive and sacred method possible by focusing the sun's rays with a bronze mirror to create a new, pure fire, essentially restarting the city's spiritual engine. But history suggests that this ritual cleansing was often not enough to avert misfortune. The ancient records are filled with instances where the dying of the flame was followed by terrible events. A devastating military defeat in a foreign war, a sudden plague sweeping through the city, or the unexpected death of a beloved emperor. All were frequently linked back to a recent extinguishing of Vesta's fire. The Romans saw a direct causal link, a supernatural chain reaction where the failure of the sacred duty directly invited divine retribution upon the state. One of the most cited examples comes from the reign of Emperor Nero, a time of great political turmoil and fires, both literal and metaphorical. It is recorded that the flame went out, and shortly after, the Great Fire of Rome erupted, consuming much of the city. While modern historians debate the causes, to the average Roman citizen, the connection was obvious and terrifying. The dying of the sacred flame was a warning they had failed to heed. The myth of the eternal flame is ultimately a story about the perceived fragility of civilization, a powerful reminder that the mightiest empire in the ancient world believed its continued existence depended on the purity of a few women and the unwavering light of a single sacred fire. Now we journey from the public forums of Rome to a place that exists more in the realm of faith, legend, and fevered dreams than in stone and mortar, the legendary Temple of Solomon in Jerusalem. While the whispering stones of Angkor Wat spoke of divine architects and the eternal flame of Vesta symbolized the soul of an empire, our third myth takes us into the profound silence of a hidden void, a secret rumored to lie deep beneath the temple's very foundations. This is the enduring legend of a vast subterranean library, a repository said to hold not just lost books of wisdom, but artifacts of such immense power that their discovery would rewrite human history. To understand the gravity of this myth, we must first grasp the significance of the first temple itself. Built in the 10th century before the Common Era by King Solomon, the son of David, it was not merely a building, it was the dwelling place of God on earth, the center of the universe for the ancient Israelites. The biblical descriptions paint a picture of staggering opulence lined with cedar and gold, a place where the divine presence, known as the Shekinah, resided in the inner sanctum, the Holy of Holies. But what if this magnificent structure was also designed to be the ultimate safe, protecting secrets too potent for the world above? The seeds of this idea are sown in ancient texts outside the standard biblical canon. The Talmud, a central text of rabbinic Judaism, makes tantalizing references to a hidden chamber beneath the temple, known as the Geniza, a storeroom for sacred texts that were too worn or heretical to be used but too holy to be destroyed. Other apocryphal works, like the Book of Enoch, speak of Solomon being a master of the mystical arts, who compiled vast knowledge of angels, demons, and the natural world. So, what was this legendary library believed to contain? The theories are as varied as they are extraordinary. One prominent belief centers on the Book of Noah, a pre-flood text said to contain astronomical secrets and building techniques of a lost civilization. Another is the Book of Raziel, an angelic text supposedly given to Adam after his exile from Eden, containing the secrets of creation itself, knowledge that could grant one the power to shape reality. Alchemists of the Middle Ages were convinced the library held the original Emerald Tablet, the foundational text of their art, which detailed the secrets of transmuting base metals into gold and achieving spiritual enlightenment. For Knights of the Crusades, particularly the Knights Templar who made their headquarters on the Temple Mount, the prize was even more tangible. They whispered of the true Ark of the Covenant, not just a gold-clad box, but a device of immense power, and of the brazen serpent Moses raised in the desert, believed to possess potent healing properties. Some legends even suggest the library contained the divine architectural blueprints for the universe, the very plans God used to create the cosmos, which Solomon had somehow obtained. This potent combination of sacred history and rumored power has ignited a fire of speculation and treasure hunting that has burned for centuries. When the Babylonians destroyed the first temple in 586 before the Common Era, the physical structure was lost, but the legend of its hidden chamber only grew stronger. Every conqueror of Jerusalem, from the Romans to the Ottomans, has been suspected of searching for this trove. The Knights Templar, during their occupation of the Temple Mount in the 12th century, are famously rumored to have conducted extensive excavations, and their sudden rise to wealth and influence has long been attributed to their discovery of something beneath the ruins. In more modern times, figures like the Victorian adventurer Montagu Brownlow Parker led a secret expedition in 1911, even tunneling beneath the Dome of the Rock, only to be discovered and chased away by angry locals. Today, the quest continues, not with shovels and torches, but with ground-penetrating radar and satellite imaging, as archaeologists and fringe researchers alike scan the bedrock of Jerusalem for any sign of the fabled hollow space. The myth persists because it speaks to a fundamental human desire, the longing for a lost golden age of knowledge, a time when humanity was closer to the divine and possessed understanding we can now only dream of. It suggests that our history is far deeper and more mysterious than the records show, and that the ultimate answers to our greatest questions might still be waiting, silent and protected, in the darkness beneath one of the world's most contested and sacred pieces of ground. From the silent, subterranean secrets of Jerusalem, we now ascend to the sun-drenched slopes of Mount Parnassus in Greece, to a place where the very air was thought to be thick with the future. This is the sanctuary of Apollo at Delphi, home to the most influential oracle of the ancient world. For centuries, kings, generals, and commoners alike made the arduous pilgrimage here, bearing lavish gifts and desperate questions, all to stand before a simple priestess known as the Pythia. She would breathe in strange fumes rising from a crack in the earth, fall into a frenzied trance, and utter cryptic words that would then be translated by priests into prophecies that shaped the course of empires. This is the story you know, but our fourth untold myth suggests this official narrative is a sanitized version of a far more ancient and primal truth. The real story isn't about Apollo alone. It's about the original, primordial power he had to conquer to claim this site, the Earth goddess Gaia, and the theory that the Pythia's power came not from a simple intoxicant, but from acting as a direct conduit to the living consciousness of the planet itself. The geological setting of Delphi is not merely a scenic backdrop, it is the very source of its mystery. The temple was built directly upon the intersection of two major fault lines, creating a deep chasm in the bedrock. For generations, the accepted scientific theory proposed in the 20th century was that intoxicating ethylene gas, a sweet-smelling hydrocarbon, would seep from this fissure and induce the Pythia's sacred trances. However, more recent geological surveys have challenged this, finding no evidence of such gases in the local limestone. This scientific debate actually opens the door to the older, more compelling myth. Long before Apollo, the site was sacred to Gaia. The ancient Greeks believed that here, at the very center of the world, Zeus had released two eagles from opposite ends of the earth, and they met at this spot, marked by the sacred stone known as the omphalos, or the navel of the world. This was a place of immense terrestrial power. The Untold myth proposes that the Pythia was not being poisoned, but was rather tapping into this power. Her trance was a form of deep, resonant communion. By sitting on her tripod stool directly over the fault lines, she was connecting with the subtle electromagnetic energies and infrasound vibrations generated by the shifting tectonic plates deep below. These are vibrations too low for the human ear to hear, but which can have profound effects on the human brain, inducing states of altered consciousness, feelings of awe, and even visions. The ceremony of consultation was not a chaotic event, but a highly ritualized process designed to amplify this connection. It always occurred on a specific day of the month, and the seeker had to first purify themselves in the Castalian spring and offer a sacrifice whose acceptance was determined by the behavior of the animals. Only then could they approach the temple, pay a special tax, and present their question, written on a lead tablet, to the male priests. The Pythia herself would undergo her own elaborate preparations, bathing in the sacred spring, drinking water from a special stream, and chewing laurel leaves, which were sacred to Apollo but may have also had mild psychoactive properties. Then she would descend into the innermost chamber, the Aditron, and take her seat on the tall, three-legged stool positioned directly over the fissure. As the priests and the supplicant waited in the antechamber, the Pythia would enter her trance. The ancient sources describe her as being filled with a divine breath or pneuma, her body contorting, her voice becoming guttural and raw. This was not seen as a possession by Apollo, but rather as her soul temporarily leaving her body to travel and gather information from the divine source, a source the myth identifies as Gaia's vast planetary consciousness. This leads to the most fascinating part of the theory, that the oracle's predictions were a sophisticated form of ancient geomancy. Geomancy is the art of divining the future by reading signs from the earth. In this case, the Pythia was not just a random channel. She was interpreting the very vibrations of the planet. The fault lines at Delphi were not silent. They were constantly humming with the stress and movement of the Earth's crust. The myth suggests that this seismic activity created a kind of information field, a collective unconscious of the planet that recorded all events, past, present, and potential futures. The Pythia, in her altered state, tuned her consciousness to this field. Her cryptic utterances, often filled with symbolic and ambiguous language, were a direct translation of this complex, non-linear information. When King Croesus of Lydia asked if he should go to war with Persia, the oracle famously told him that if he did, a great empire would be destroyed. He assumed it was the Persian Empire, but it was his own that fell. This was not a trick or a mistake, but a reflection of how the Earth's intelligence operates. It presents possibilities and patterns, not simple, linear answers. The true power of the Oracle of Delphi, according to this untold myth, was that it represented a time when humanity sought guidance not from distant gods in the sky, but from the living, breathing, and vibrating world beneath their feet. It was a sacred technology for listening to the planet, and the Pythia was its most skilled and revered interpreter. From the prophetic energies of Delphi, we journey now to a place where divinity is believed to be locked in solid gold, protected not by armies but by a spiritual force so potent that it has shaped the destiny of an entire nation. In the heart of Bangkok, within the sacred precincts of the Grand Palace, stands the Wat Phra Kieu, the Temple of the Emerald Buddha. This is the home of the fifth untold myth, a legend not of whispers or flames, but of a powerful and active curse safeguarding one of the most revered religious icons on Earth. The object of this devotion is the Phra Kiu Morakot, the Emerald Buddha itself. Carved from a single block of vibrant green jadeite, not emerald, the statue is relatively small, only about 66 centimeters tall, yet its spiritual and political significance to Thailand is immeasurable. It is not merely a representation of the Buddha, it is considered the palladium of the Thai kingdom, the divine protector of the nation, and it is believed that a powerful, protective spirit resides within the statue itself, one that fiercely punishes any form of disrespect or theft. The legend is inextricably linked to the statue's own turbulent history, a centuries-long odyssey of conquest and theft that reads like an ancient epic. The earliest chronicles suggest the statue was created in India around the year 43 before the Common Era, before embarking on a journey across Southeast Asia. It was said to have been in Sri Lanka, then Cambodia, before arriving in the ancient Lan Na Kingdom in northern Thailand in the 15th century. It was here, in the city of Chiang Rai, that the statue's divine nature was reportedly revealed. According to the tale, the statue was covered in stucco and gold leaf to conceal its true value from invaders. It was housed in a temple, and one day, the stucco on its nose chipped away, revealing the brilliant green stone beneath. The abbot, attempting to remove more of the covering, discovered the priceless jadeite figure inside. The statue was then moved to Chiang Mai, the Lan Na capital, but its travels were far from over. In 1552, the king of the neighboring Lao kingdom of Lan Xang, who was also the son of the king of Chiang Mai, took the Emerald Buddha back to his capital in Luang Prabang and later to Vientiane. For over 200 years, the statue remained there, becoming the most sacred object in the Lao kingdom. This long period of absence from Thai lands is crucial to the myth, as it established a pattern where possession of the statue was synonymous with the legitimacy and power of the ruler. Then, in 1779, the Thai general, who would later become King Rama I, marched on Vientiane, captured the city, and brought the Emerald Buddha back to Siam as a prize of war. He founded the new Chakri dynasty and built the Grand Palace and the Wat Phra Kiu specifically to house the statue, cementing its role as the spiritual cornerstone of the modern Thai nation. This history of being seized and moved by force is the fertile ground from which the curse legends grew. The alleged misfortunes that have befallen those who threatened the statue form the core evidence for the curse. The narrative suggests that the protective spirit within the Phra Kiu does not merely disapprove of theft, it actively retaliates. The most poignant examples come from the Lao kings who lost possession of the statue. After the Emerald Buddha was taken by the Siamese, the Lao kingdom of Lan Xang entered a period of decline and was eventually dismantled, with its territories falling under Siamese and later French control. To those who believe, this was not mere historical coincidence, but a direct consequence of losing the divine protector. More recent and visceral stories involve individuals who attempted to desecrate or steal from the temple. There are persistent accounts from the late 19th and early 20th centuries of thieves attempting to pry gold leaf or jewels from the temple's decorations, only to meet with sudden and inexplicable ends, fatal falls, mysterious illnesses, or being struck by lightning in clear weather. One particularly chilling story, often recounted by temple guides, involves a foreign soldier during a time of conflict who, in an act of hubris, climbed onto the altar to mock the statue. He is said to have slipped, fallen on his own bayonet, and died on the spot within the sacred chapel. These tales are not formally documented in history books, but they are a vibrant and believed part of the local oral tradition, serving as powerful cautionary tales that reinforce the sanctity of the site. This belief in an active, protective spirit is deeply woven into the fabric of Thai Buddhist culture. The Emerald Buddha is not treated as an inanimate object. It is a living entity, the King of Thailand or senior royal family members personally preside over the ceremony to change the statue's ornate gold robes 3 times a year, marking the hot, rainy, and cool seasons. This ritual is an act of devotion and service to the enlightened being believed to reside within the Jadate. The belief system here is animistic, blended seamlessly with Buddhist doctrine. It holds that powerful, benevolent spirits can inhabit places and objects, especially those consecrated through intense and prolonged devotion. The centuries of prayers, offerings, and reverence directed at the Emerald Buddha are thought to have charged it with a palpable spiritual energy, a consciousness that guards both itself and the nation it symbolizes. This is why the rules of conduct within the temple are so strictly enforced. Visitors must sit with their feet pointed away from the main image, dress modestly, and speak in hushed tones. These are not just rules of etiquette, they are acts of respect meant to avoid offending the resident spirit. The curse, then, is not seen as a malevolent spell cast by someone, but as the natural, karmic consequence of violating a sacred space and challenging a divine presence. It is the manifestation of the Buddha's protective compassion for the faithful, a force that ensures the stability of the kingdom by punishing those who would seek to disrupt its spiritual center. The legend of the cursed gold is therefore far more than a superstition. It is a profound cultural narrative about the tangible power of faith and the perceived reality that some things are so sacred, they are defended by a power beyond our understanding. Venturing next to the high plains of Bolivia, we encounter a structure so enigmatic that it seems to defy the very capabilities of the civilization that created it. At the ancient city of Tiwanaku, near the shores of Lake Titicaca, stands the monumental Gateway of the Sun, carved from a single, enormous block of andesite stone weighing an estimated 10 tons. This archway is the focal point of our sixth myth. The official archaeological narrative places the peak of Tiwanaku between 500 and 1000 Common Era, a powerful pre-Columbian empire. Yet the Aymara people, the indigenous inhabitants of the region, hold an older, more profound belief. They call the site Tepecola, which means the stone in the center, and their legends state that it was constructed in a single night by a race of giants, or by the god Viracocha himself, the creator deity who brought light to a world of darkness. The central myth surrounding the Sun Gate is that it was not merely a ceremonial arch but a functional stargate, a portal used by these celestial beings to travel between worlds. This idea is fueled by the gateway's incredible and precise astronomical alignments. The entire city of Tiwanaku is laid out as a massive astronomical observatory, aligned with the cardinal directions with an accuracy that rivals modern instruments. The Sun Gate itself is positioned so that on the spring equinox, the rising sun shines directly through the doorway, illuminating the center of the adjacent Kalasasaya temple complex. But the most compelling evidence for the Stargate theory is found in the intricate carvings that cover the lintel. At the center is a figure often identified as the staff god, believed to represent Viracocha, who is surrounded by 48 mysterious winged figures. 32 of them have human faces, while the other 16 have condor heads. For decades, these were dismissed as mere decorative symbols. However, some researchers, like author and explorer Graham Hancock, have proposed a radical reinterpretation. They suggest this carving is not just a mythological scene, but a sophisticated star chart and a calendar. The 48 figures could represent a system of astronomical knowledge, perhaps encoding precessional cycles or marking the positions of key stars. The central figure, Viracocha, is framed by a series of circles that some interpret as a representation of a portal or vortex. The myth gains further traction from the sheer engineering mystery of the gateway's creation. The andesite stone was quarried from a site over 100 kilometers away, across the lake and over rugged terrain. How a supposedly pre-industrial society transported and then carved this massive block with such intricate, laser-like precision remains one of archaeology's great unanswered questions. The Stargate myth endures because it offers an explanation for these mysteries, proposing that the Tiwanaku civilization possessed a knowledge of cosmic forces and interdimensional travel that we are only now beginning to conceptualize. Simultaneously challenging our historical timeline, we now travel to the rolling hills of southeastern Turkey, where a discovery in the 1990s sent shockwaves through the archaeological world. This is Göbekli Tepe, a complex of massive T-shaped stone pillars arranged in circular formations, and it is the oldest known temple in the world, dating back an astonishing 11,600 years. This is a full 6,000 years older than Stonehenge and 5,000 years before the first cities of Mesopotamia. The official academic consensus is that Göbekli Tepe was built by hunter-gatherers, a conclusion that forces a complete rewrite of human history, as it suggests complex religion and organized society predated agriculture. But the seventh untold myth presents an even more radical theory, that Göbekli Tepe was not the product of simple nomadic bands, but was a central knowledge center for a lost advanced civilization that was wiped out by a global cataclysm, and that the site was deliberately and carefully buried around 8,000 before the Common Era to preserve its secrets for a future age. The evidence for this theory is as compelling as it is controversial. First, the sophistication of the architecture is staggering. The pillars are enormous, some weighing over 20 tons, and were quarried from a nearby bedrock pit and then moved hundreds of meters to the site. This implies a level of social organization, engineering skill, and labor management that mainstream archaeology has never attributed to hunter-gatherers. The carvings on the pillars are another major point of contention. They are covered with intricate and refined reliefs of animals, foxes, scorpions, vultures, and snakes, executed with an artistic skill that seems to appear fully formed, with no evidence of prior, cruder development. More puzzling are the abstract symbols, including H-shaped carvings, handbags, and what appear to be depictions of humanoid figures in non-human clothing. These have drawn striking parallels to symbols found in later Mesopotamian cultures, suggesting a continuity of knowledge that spans millennia. The most radical interpretation of these carvings is that they are not simply shamanic or animistic symbols, but a form of recorded knowledge. Some researchers propose the animal carvings represent constellations, and the entire site is a massive Stone Age observatory designed to track celestial events, perhaps even warning of a specific threat. This leads to the second pillar of the myth, the deliberate burial. Göbekli Tepe was not abandoned and left to decay. Around 8,000 before the Common Era, the entire complex was backfilled with hundreds of tons of soil, stone, and animal bones, a monumental undertaking in its own right. Why would the builders or their descendants go to such extraordinary lengths to entomb their greatest achievement? The mainstream theory suggests it was a ritual act of decommissioning. The alternate theory is far more dramatic. It posits that the burial was an act of preservation. The founders of Göbekli Tepe, survivors of a lost advanced culture, knew a cataclysmic event was coming, perhaps the Younger Dryas impact event, a theoretical comet strike around 12,800 years ago that plunged the world into a mini ice age. They encoded their knowledge into the stones and then buried the site to protect it from destruction, creating a time capsule meant to be rediscovered by a future civilization capable of understanding its message. The fact that the burial perfectly preserved the site for 12,000 years, leaving the pillars standing and the carvings in near pristine condition, lends a powerful, eerie credibility to this idea. It suggests a conscious, deliberate act of saving knowledge across an unimaginable gulf of time. Together, the myths of Tiwanaku's Sun Gate and Göbekli Tepe's subterranean secret present a unified and revolutionary challenge to our past. They argue that the story of humanity is far older and more complex than we have been taught, filled with forgotten chapters of high achievement, cosmic awareness, and a desperate struggle to preserve a legacy against the relentless tide of time and catastrophe. As our journey through these sacred enigmas continues, we turn to two extraordinary sites separated by vast distances and cultures, yet bound by a shared belief in benevolent supernatural forces that actively engage with the world. In the steamy jungles of Java, the world's largest Buddhist temple rises like a massive stone mandala from the earth, while in the foothills of the French Pyrenees, a humble grotto draws millions seeking divine intervention. These are not places of passive history, they are realms where the spiritual world is said to reach out and touch our own in protective and healing ways. Our eighth myth takes us to the majestic Borobudur, a colossal structure built in the 9th century, comprising 9 stacked platforms crowned by a central dome and adorned with 2,672 intricate relief panels and 504 Buddha statues. To the casual observer, these statues are serene, identical sentinels frozen in meditation for over a millennium. But local Javanese folklore tells a far more dynamic story. It is believed that these stone figures are not inert carvings at all, but vessels for powerful guardian spirits known as Danawa or Jinn who are bound to the temple. According to the myth, when the sun sets and the last visitor departs, a profound transformation occurs. The stone figures are said to stir, their serene expressions softening into watchful vigilance as they step down from their perches. They take on a luminous, ethereal form and begin to patrol the vast corridors and terraces of the monument. Farmers living in the villages surrounding the temple have long reported seeing faint, ghostly lights moving in a slow, deliberate procession around the upper circular terraces late at night. Others speak of hearing the soft, rustling sound of monastic robes and the faint, soothing hum of ancient mantras drifting on the wind when there is no one there. The purpose of these shape-shifting guardians is not to frighten but to protect. They are the eternal custodians of Borobudur's sacred geometry, a physical representation of the Buddhist cosmos. It is believed they ward off both physical thieves and malevolent spiritual forces that might seek to desecrate or disrupt the temple's powerful spiritual energy. One compelling account from a Dutch colonial officer's diary in the 19th century describes his decision to camp illegally within the temple grounds to prove the superstitions wrong. He wrote of being awakened in the dead of night by a feeling of being watched, only to see several of the seated Buddha figures on the higher levels seemingly facing different directions than they had during the day. Though he attributed it to disorientation, he confessed to an overwhelming sense of a benevolent presence herding him gently but firmly down the monument steps and away from the central stupa, a place he felt he was not meant to be. This myth beautifully merges ancient animistic beliefs with Buddhist doctrines, suggesting that the intense devotion and spiritual energy concentrated at Borobudur over centuries have awakened a conscious, protective life within the very stone itself, creating a living fortress of faith that never sleeps. Crossing continents from this tropical sanctuary, we arrive at the serene town of Lourdes in France, the setting for our 9th myth and a phenomenon of a different kind of active benevolence, miraculous healing. The world knows the story of Bernadette Soubirous, the young peasant girl who, in 1858, witnessed 18 apparitions of a beautiful lady in a nearby grotto, later identified as the Virgin Mary. During one of these visions, the lady instructed Bernadette to dig in the earth from which a spring began to flow. This spring has since become the source of over 70 officially recognized miracles by the Catholic Church, where people with incurable illnesses have been suddenly and completely healed after bathing in its waters. But the untold myth of Lourdes delves into a deeper, more ancient layer of the site's power. Long before Bernadette, the Grotto of Massabielle was known to the local pagan and Celtic peoples. Archaeological and folkloric evidence suggests it was a sacred site dedicated to a local water deity or earth goddess, a place where the veil between worlds was considered thin. Local legends passed down through generations speak of a fountain of the fairies or a healing stone in the very same area, where villagers would bring their sick to be cured by waters that were believed to be gifted with life-giving properties from the earth itself. This pre-Christian history presents a fascinating possibility that the Marian apparitions did not create a new holy site, but rather sanctified and redirected a location that was already deeply revered for its inherent telluric energy. The myth suggests that the power of Lourdes is not solely a product of 19th-century Catholic piety, but a continuous, ancient force that has been recognized and channeled by different cultures across millennia. The spring did not miraculously appear in 1858. It was revealed, its flow directed from a hidden, subterranean source to the surface. This aligns with geological studies that show the water comes from a deep aquifer in the Pyrenees, filtered through limestone and marble, acquiring a unique mineral composition. While science can describe the water's properties, it cannot explain the specific, instantaneous, and medically inexplicable cures that occur there. The enduring myth posits that the site itself is a natural reservoir of a profound healing energy, a power that the pagan Celts attributed to their gods, and that Christians later understood as a manifestation of divine grace through the Virgin Mary. It is a place where faith acts as a key, unlocking a pre-existing benevolent force within the earth. The countless crutches and canes left behind in the grotto are not just testaments to a single religion's power, but to a timeless, location-specific phenomenon of compassion, suggesting that some places on our planet are naturally endowed with an active, healing presence that humanity has instinctively sought out since time immemorial. Moving from the realms of protective spirits and healing waters, we now enter a domain where architecture itself becomes a form of magic, and the very stones are engineered not just to stand, but to sing and defy the laws of physics. Our journey brings us to two astounding sites, one in southern India and another on a Mediterranean island, where ancient builders seemingly manipulated sound and gravity in ways that continue to baffle modern science. These are not myths of gods or curses, but of human ingenuity so profound it borders on the supernatural. In the small village of Lepakshi in Andhra Pradesh, India, stands the magnificent Virabhadra temple, a 16th-century marvel of Vijayanagara architecture. Within its grand hall, supported by 70 exquisitely carved pillars, lies a phenomenon that has captivated visitors for centuries, the famous hanging pillar. As you walk through the hall, temple guides will enthusiastically demonstrate this marvel. They will take a thin piece of cloth or a sheet of paper and slide it effortlessly from one side of the pillar to the other, proving that there is a clear gap between the bottom of the pillar and the floor. The pillar appears to be balancing in mid-air, defying gravity and the fundamental principles of structural engineering. The official explanation from engineers who have studied it suggests that the pillar may have become dislodged due to a shift in the foundation, perhaps from a minor earthquake centuries ago. But the local myth, the one passed down through generations of priests and storytellers, offers a far more poetic and profound reason for this imperfection. They say that the chief architect of the temple was so immensely proud of his work, so confident in his skill, that he boasted he could build a perfect temple without a single flaw. As the construction neared completion, he stood back to admire his masterpiece, certain that he had achieved the impossible. It was then, in a moment of divine intervention, that he realized his hubris. The gods, wishing to remind him that true perfection belongs only to the divine, caused one of the pillars to lift slightly from its base, leaving the temple forever unfinished. The architect, understanding the lesson, chose to leave it as it was a permanent testament to his own humility and a reminder to all who visit that human achievement, no matter how grand, must always bow before the infinite majesty of the gods. This hanging pillar is not seen as a construction error, but as the most important part of the entire temple, a spiritual anchor that grounds the entire complex in a lesson of devotion over pride. Attempts to fix the pillar in the colonial era are said to have caused other pillars in the hall to shift, leading to the belief that the entire structure is in a delicate, divinely ordained balance, and to tamper with one part is to risk the whole. Meanwhile, across the Arabian Sea on the small island of Malta, a very different kind of architectural marvel lies hidden deep underground. The Hal Saflieni Hypogeum is a labyrinthine, three-level subterranean temple complex carved from Globigerina limestone dating back over 5,000 years. It is a silent, eerie world of burial chambers and oracle rooms, but if you listen closely, legend says you can hear it sing. This is the myth of the Hypogeum's singing columns, specifically within a small, oval-shaped chamber known as the Oracle Room. This chamber contains a number of niches and architectural features, but its most famous attribute is its astonishing acoustics. If a person with a deep, resonant voice speaks or chants into a specific niche on one wall, the sound is amplified and projected throughout the entire complex with a powerful, otherworldly quality. It doesn't just get louder, it seems to transform, taking on a metallic, reverberant character that feels both inside your head and all around you simultaneously. The local legend, supported by modern acoustic studies, posits that the prehistoric builders did not just stumble upon this effect, they engineered it. They carefully sculpted the limestone walls and ceilings to create specific resonant frequencies. The most powerful of these is a fundamental frequency of around 110 Hz, a low hum that falls within the range of the human male baritone voice. Why would they go to such lengths? The untold myth suggests the Hypogeum was not merely a burial site. It was an ancient chamber for sonic healing and ritual trance. Neuroscientific research has shown that exposure to sound frequencies around 110 Hz can have a profound effect on human brain activity. It can suppress activity in the language centers of the brain's left hemisphere, while simultaneously stimulating activity in the right hemisphere, which is associated with spatial perception, intuition, and emotional processing. This shift in brain function can induce altered states of consciousness, heighten suggestibility, and create intense feelings of connectivity and transcendence. In the absolute darkness of the Hypogeum, with only flickering oil lamps for light, a priest or shaman chanting into the sacred niche could fill the entire oracle room with a vibration that physically and mentally altered everyone present. It would have been a tool for communing with the ancestors buried in the surrounding chambers, for receiving prophecies, or for healing rituals where the very vibration of the stone was believed to rearrange the spiritual and physical body. The myth of the singing columns presents the Hypogeum as one of the world's oldest and most sophisticated instruments, a massive, stone-built device for consciousness alteration, proving that its builders possessed a forgotten science of sound that we are only now beginning to rediscover and understand. From the ethereal acoustics of Malta to the gravity-defying pillars of India, we've seen how sacred sites can manipulate the very fabric of our reality. But now we descend into a different kind of power, one born not from harmony, but from the most profound and unsettling of offerings. Our path leads us to two temples where the concept of protection takes a far darker form, rooted in rituals of blood and the unwavering loyalty of spectral armies. These are the myths of dark guardianship, where the echoes of ancient violence are said to be anything but silent. Deep beneath the modern streets of Mexico City lie the ruins of the Templo Mayor, the great temple of the Aztec capital, Tenochtitlan. The official history is one of staggering scale and spiritual ferocity. This was a twin pyramid complex dedicated to both Tlaloc, the god of rain and agriculture, and Huitzilopochtli, the god of sun and war. To the Aztecs, the universe was in a constant state of peril, threatened by darkness and chaos. The sun itself needed strength to rise each day, and that strength, they believed, came from the most precious substance in existence, human blood, or Chalchihuol, precious water. This was not simple brutality, it was a sacred, cosmological duty. The pinnacle of this duty was the practice of heart sacrifice. Captive warriors, often from rival city-states, would be led up the temple steps. At the summit, 4 priests would hold them down over the Tekkatl, a convex stone, while a 5th priest would plunge an obsidian knife into their chest, ripping out their still beating heart to offer it to the sun. The body would then be thrown down the steep steps, a cascading flow of life given to sustain the cosmos. But our 12th untold myth proposes that this river of blood did more than just feed the gods. It left an indelible spiritual residue. The legend states that the spirits of these sacrificed warriors never truly left the Templo Maya. Bound by the power of the ritual and their own warrior honor, they were transformed into an eternal god, their ethereal forms forever bound to the stones upon which they died. Today, as archaeologists carefully excavate the site and tourists walk the raised platforms, there are persistent accounts of an oppressive, watchful presence. Visitors speak of a sudden, inexplicable chill in the humid air, a feeling of being intently studied by unseen eyes from the shadows of the ruined temples. More chillingly, some report hearing faint, phantom sounds, not whispers, but the distant, guttural roar of a battle cry, the sharp clatter of obsidian swords against wooden shields, or a single, terrifying drumbeat that seems to come from everywhere at once. These experiences are most frequently reported at dusk or during the anniversaries of major Aztec festivals, temporal windows when the veil between the past and present is believed to thin. The myth suggests that the Templo Maya is not a dead ruin, but a place where the spiritual energy of thousands of sacrifices has coalesced, creating a permanent, vigilant garrison of ghostly warriors still standing their post, forever protecting the sacred ground where they made their ultimate offering. Across the globe, in the heart of Bangkok, lies a temple that presents a serene and peaceful face to the world by day, but is said to be the fortress of a very different kind of spectral host by night. This is Wat Pho, home to Thailand's magnificent reclining Buddha, a breathtaking statue 46 meters long and entirely covered in gold leaf, depicting the Buddha in his final moments before entering nirvana. The atmosphere here is one of profound tranquility and reverence, but as the sun sets and the gates close, our 13th untold myth awakens. Thai folklore is rich with beliefs in Phra Phum, or guardian spirits of the land, and Phai, spirits of the deceased. The most powerful of these are the Phai Tale, protective spirits drawn from those who died with great honor or with unfinished business tied to a specific location. The legend of Wat Pho tells of an invisible army of such spirits, a ghostly garrison sworn to protect the reclining Buddha and the temple's vast collection of sacred texts and artifacts. The source of these spirits is often linked to the temple's own long history. Wat Pho is one of the oldest temples in Bangkok, built on the site of an even older place of worship. Over the centuries, countless monks, artisans, and devout patrons have lived, worked, and died within its walls. The myth holds that the most devoted among them, their souls so deeply connected to the sanctity of the site, chose not to move on but to remain as eternal sentinels. Stories from night watchmen and nearby residents form the backbone of this belief. They speak of hearing the synchronized, rhythmic tread of marching feet along the temple's outer walls when no one is visible. There are accounts of shadowy, indistinct figures seen patrolling the rooftops, their forms flickering in and out of existence. Some have reported finding the temple's countless smaller Buddha statues mysteriously rearranged by morning, not in disarray, but positioned as if they had formed a protective circle around the main chapel. One particularly detailed account comes from a Thai soldier stationed nearby in the 1980s, who insisted that while walking past the temple late one night, he saw a full phalanx of translucent, ancient Siamese warriors standing shoulder to shoulder before the main entrance. He described them not as threatening, but as profoundly solemn and immovable, their gaze fixed forward as if awaiting an unseen enemy. The tale of the ghost army of Wat Pho is a perfect fusion of Buddhist reverence and ancient animistic belief. It reflects a worldview where sacred spaces are not just physical locations, but living spiritual ecosystems, protected not only by human monks, but by a loyal, unseen community of the faithful who have transcended death itself to continue their sacred vigil. From the spectral armies of ancient temples, we now plunge into the very element that covers most of our planet water, and the legends of a city lost beneath its waves. Our 14th Untold myth takes us to the coast of modern-day Gujarat in India, to the legendary city of Dwarka, the celestial kingdom of the god Krishna. The ancient Sanskrit epic, the Mahabharata, offers a breathtaking description of this metropolis. It speaks of a city built on the orders of Krishna himself, a place of unparalleled splendor with magnificent palaces made of gold, silver, and precious stones, and a grand temple at its heart. The city was said to be protected by powerful, divine energy, a fortress of righteousness, but the epic also foretells its dramatic end. Following Krishna's departure from the mortal world, the great city was engulfed by the sea, vanishing in a single day beneath the roaring waves as if it had never existed. For centuries, this was considered a beautiful, poetic allegory, a mythic tale of a golden age that was lost. However, in the late 20th and early 21st centuries, a series of stunning underwater discoveries began to challenge that assumption. Marine archaeologists exploring the Gulf of Cambay and off the coast of modern Dwarka have uncovered the remains of a vast submerged settlement. They have found massive stone structures, including large pillars, walls, and geometric formations that clearly indicate human planning and construction. Among the most compelling artifacts recovered from the seafloor are stone anchors, pottery shards, and other debris that have been carbon dated to around 1500 years before the Common Era, a time frame that aligns intriguingly with the traditional dating of the events in the Mahabharata. While mainstream science cautions that these could be the remains of an ancient port city that succumbed to rising sea levels, a known phenomenon after the last ice age, the proponents of the myth see a powerful validation. They argue that the scale and sophistication of the submerged ruins, their location, and their age provide a tangible, physical foundation for the epic narrative. The legend of Dwarka is not just a story of a sunken city. It is a profound cultural memory of a catastrophic event that wiped out a center of advanced civilization, a story of divine power and the ocean's relentless might that was passed down through generations until science finally began to catch up with the poetry. Shifting from the power of water to the power of light, we travel to the sprawling sandstone complex of Karnak in Egypt, the setting for our 15th myth. While most visitors gaze in awe at the forest of towering columns in the great hypostyle hall, our story focuses on a far more elusive treasure, the legendary Mirror of Ammon. Ancient texts and enduring local folklore speak of a sacred object kept in the innermost sanctums of the temple of Ammon-Ra, the king of the gods. This was not an ordinary mirror, but a disc of polished obsidian or electrum, an alloy of gold and silver that was said to have been a gift from the gods themselves. The myth claims that during specific rituals, the high priest of Ammon, the most powerful religious figure in Egypt, could gaze into this mirror and witness visions of the future. The mirror did not show a simple, clear picture, but rather shifting patterns of light and shadow from which a trained seer could interpret portents and divine the will of the gods, guiding the pharaohs in matters of war, state, and succession. This idea of a prophetic mirror is deeply intertwined with Karnak's well-established role as one of the ancient world's most sophisticated astronomical observatories. The entire temple complex is precisely aligned with celestial events. Its main axis is oriented toward the setting sun on the winter solstice, and specific chambers and corridors are designed to capture beams of light on significant dates, illuminating statues of the gods in a dramatic display of celestial engineering. The myth proposes that the Mirror of Ammon was the pinnacle of this sacred technology. It may have functioned as a type of heliograph or a specialized reflective device used to capture and redirect the sun's rays. the literal manifestation of Ra's power into dark, enclosed chambers. In this controlled, ritualized environment, the intense, focused light interacting with the polished surface could have created dazzling optical effects, patterns, and even induced a form of flicker-induced trance in the priest. This altered state of consciousness, combined with the priest's deep knowledge of astronomy and mythology, would have allowed for profound intuitive interpretations that were perceived as glimpses into the future. The mirror was not a crystal ball, but a sophisticated tool for harnessing the sun's energy to expand the mind's perception, turning the temple into a machine for communicating with the divine timeline. The legend of the mirror underscores the Egyptians' belief that the universe was an orderly, predictable system, and that with the right knowledge and sacred instruments, its secrets, including the flow of time itself, could be perceived and understood. High in the unforgiving embrace of the Indian Himalayas, where the air grows thin and the mountains touch the sky, lies one of Hinduism's most revered and inaccessible shrines, the Kedarnath Temple. Dedicated to Lord Shiva, the destroyer and transformer, this ancient stone structure stands at an altitude of over 3,500 meters, surrounded by the snow-capped peaks of the Garhwal Range. The journey to Kedarnath is itself a test of devotion, a steep trek of 16 kilometers from the nearest road, through treacherous paths that are open only a few months each year between the spring thaw and the autumn snows. Pilgrims brave altitude sickness, freezing temperatures, and unpredictable weather, all for a few moments of darshan, the sacred act of beholding the deity. But the true power of this place is not in its formidable location, but in the object of worship housed within its inner sanctum. This is the story of the 16th untold myth, the legend of the self-created lingam of Kedarnath. Unlike the intricately carved statues and lingams found in other temples, the sacred icon here is a natural, irregular rock formation, humbly housed in a simple, cave-like chamber. According to the ancient texts, the Mahabharata and the Skanda Purana, this is no man-made idol. The myth tells that after the great war of Kurukshetra, the Pandava brothers, burdened with the guilt of killing their kin, sought absolution from Lord Shiva. Shiva, unwilling to grant them easy pardon, eluded them, taking the form of a bull and diving into the ground at Kedarnath. As he disappeared, different parts of his divine form resurfaced at 5 distinct locations, which became the Panch Kedar, the 5 sacred shrines. At Kedarnath, it was his hump that miraculously manifested as this natural lingam, a spontaneous, self-created emergence of divine energy from the very body of the earth. This is not a symbol of Shiva. It is believed to be a literal, physical fragment of his presence, a permanent anchor of his consciousness in the mortal world. The belief in this divine origin is inseparable from a more recent, terrifying event that has been interpreted by millions as direct proof of Shiva's ongoing protection. In June 2013, the state of Uttarakhand was struck by a catastrophic multi-day cloudburst and flash flood of biblical proportions. Torrential rainfall, equivalent to a typical monsoon season falling in just a few days, triggered devastating landslides and caused glacial lakes to burst their banks. A massive wall of water, mud, and boulders thundered down the Mandakini River valley directly toward the Kedarnath temple. The town surrounding the shrine was almost completely obliterated. Buildings, hotels, and roads were scoured from the earth in an instant. Thousands of pilgrims and locals lost their lives in the deluge, yet when the floodwaters receded, a miracle stood amid the utter destruction. The ancient Kedarnath temple, though battered and surrounded by a sea of debris, remained standing. Even more astoundingly, a gigantic, 30-foot-high boulder had been carried by the tremendous force of the flood and came to a stop just behind the temple, diverting the main onslaught of water and debris around the structure, acting as a natural shield. From a geological perspective, this was a fortunate and random act of nature, a perfect confluence of the temple's sturdy construction and the boulder's fortunate placement. But for the devout and for many survivors, there was no randomness involved. This was the hand of Shiva. The first-hand accounts from those who were there during the disaster have become a core part of the modern mythos, oral testimonies that speak of an otherworldly intervention. One often recounted story comes from a group of pilgrims and priests who were trapped inside the temple itself as the waters rose. They described the horrifying roar of the approaching flood, a sound like 1,000 freight trains, and the violent shaking of the ground. As water began to pour into the sanctum, they reportedly huddled around the lingam, praying fervently. Several individuals later swore that at the peak of the chaos, they felt a profound and sudden calm descend upon the inner chamber, and that the stone lingam itself seemed to emit a soft, warm glow, a protective aura that held back the encroaching devastation just long enough for them to survive. Another survivor, a local shopkeeper who watched the event unfold from a higher slope, described a vision that has since become legend. He insisted that just as the colossal wave was about to hit the temple, he saw the faint, luminous form of a giant, meditating figure enveloping the shrine, a spectral guardian that the floodwaters simply parted around. While these accounts are subjective and unverifiable, they are deeply felt and widely believed, reinforcing the ancient narrative that Kedarnath is not just a building, but a living entity under the direct guardianship of its deity. The temple's survival against impossible odds is seen as a modern validation of a timeless truth, that the Jyotirlingam, the pillar of light that is Shiva's true form, is indestructible, and that the place where it chose to manifest itself is eternally protected. The great boulder that saved the temple is now revered as the Shila, or divine rock, another element in the sacred geography of the site, a permanent testament to a moment when faith and a force of nature collided, and faith, for countless believers, emerged unquestionably victorious. From the elemental power and divine protection of the Himalayas, we journey now to the heart of medieval France, to a cathedral that is often called the high point of Gothic architecture. Chartres Cathedral, with its soaring spires and kaleidoscopic windows, is a testament to faith that has drawn pilgrims for centuries. But beneath its orthodox surface lies a tantalizing and persistent legend, the 17th of our untold myths, which suggests the master masons who built it were not just devout Christians, but also secret alchemists who encoded their esoteric knowledge into the very stones and glass, creating a vast, three-dimensional book for those with the eyes to see. This is the story of Chartres as a crucible for spiritual transformation, a machine designed to transmute the soul of the pilgrim, just as an alchemist sought to transmute base metal into gold. The most immediate and physical clue to this hidden purpose lies at your feet the moment you enter the nave. Stretching across the floor of the cathedral is a massive labyrinth, a complex circular path nearly 13 meters in diameter. To the average medieval pilgrim, this was a substitute for an actual pilgrimage to Jerusalem. By walking its path on their knees in prayer, they could achieve spiritual penance without the perilous journey. But to the alchemical initiate, the labyrinth was infinitely more. It represented the prima materia, the chaotic base matter at the start of the great work. The single, winding path, which offers no choices or dead ends but demands patient perseverance to its center, was a map of the soul's arduous journey toward enlightenment. The walk to the center symbolized the stage of Nigredo, the blackening, where the ego is dissolved and the seeker confronts their own inner darkness and impurities. The moment of reaching the center, the rosette, represented albedo, the whitening, a moment of illumination and connection with the divine. The return journey back out into the world then symbolized rubedo, the reddening, where the transformed individual returns to daily life, now able to manifest their enlightened state in the world. This was not a simple walk. It was a profound meditative and alchemical ritual built into the very floor of the church, a physical enactment of a spiritual process that the builders embedded for those who understood its deeper language. Raising our eyes from the floor, the cathedral's stained glass windows present another layer of this encoded wisdom. Chartres possesses one of the most complete and brilliant collections of medieval stained glass in the world, with over 170 windows containing thousands of individual scenes. The official interpretation is that these were the Bible of the illiterate, teaching scripture through light and color. Yet, the alchemical legend points to a more subtle narrative woven into the famous blue glass, a color so unique it is known simply as Chartres blue. The method for creating this specific cobalt-based blue was lost for centuries, a fact that itself fuels the myth of lost knowledge. Alchemy is deeply concerned with color sequences that mark the stages of transformation, and the windows present a symphony of symbolic color. The profound blue represents the celestial and the divine, the spiritual sky into which the soul ascends. The fiery reds signify the sulfur principle of passion and transformation, while the greens represent the vital life force and growth. But the true alchemical secret may lie in the window's function as a whole. They are not merely pictures, they are filters for celestial light. The entire cathedral becomes a giant camera obscura, transforming raw sunlight into a sacred, colored energy that fills the space. Alchemists spoke of capturing the light of nature, and here the building itself performs this act daily. The specific placement of windows, such as the stunning North Rose window representing the Virgin Mary and the Old Testament, and the South Rose window representing Christ and the New Testament, creates a dynamic balance of light and symbolism, a cosmic equilibrium that bathes the interior in a living, breathing energy that was believed to directly affect the consciousness of those within. This brings us to the architectural genius of the structure itself, and the theory that Chartres was designed as a resonant chamber to harness specific celestial energies. The cathedral is a masterpiece of sacred geometry, its proportions based on the golden ratio and harmonic sequences found in nature and music. Every column, arch, and vault is mathematically precise. Some researchers, like the visionary architect Louis Charpentier, have proposed that the cathedral was built on a powerful telluric site, a place where earth energies were particularly strong, and that the building acts as an antenna and amplifier for these forces. The layout is precisely aligned with the sun's movements, most spectacularly on the summer solstice. At a specific time in the afternoon, a single beam of sunlight shines through a small, strategically placed opening high in the south wall and strikes a metal plaque set into the floor of the ambulatory. This plaque is not centrally located. It is off to the side, marking a precise astronomical alignment that would have required sophisticated knowledge. For the alchemist, this was the moment of conjunction, the sacred marriage of solar and terrestrial energies, a literal spotlight from the heavens activating a specific point within the stone vessel of the cathedral. Finally, we must consider the silent teachers carved into the stone, the thousands of statues that adorn the portals, particularly the three western doorways known as the Royal Portal. Here, the figures are elongated, serene, and rigidly vertical, embodying a transcendent spirituality. They depict kings, queens, prophets, and saints, but alchemical interpretation sees the representation of the 7 planetary metals in their attributes and placements. The figure of Melchizedek, the priest-king, holding a chalice, can be seen as a symbol of the alchemical vessel. The famous statue of Christ teaching, with his hand raised in a specific gesture, is interpreted not just as a blessing, but as a depiction of the transmission of esoteric knowledge. Every carving, from the foliage inhabited by fauns and spirits to the grand depictions of the Last Judgment, tells a dual story, one for the faithful masses and another, deeper narrative for the initiate about the laws of the universe, the process of inner purification, and the ultimate goal of achieving the philosopher's stone, which in this context was not a physical object but the perfect and illuminated human soul. The legend of Chartres Cathedral endures because the building itself is so overwhelmingly powerful that it invites these deeper readings. It stands as a sublime union of stone, light, and geometry, a silent witness to the possibility that the greatest works of faith are also the greatest repositories of a hidden universal science. From the encoded alchemy of a French cathedral, we transport ourselves to the very heart of Imperial China, to a citadel of power so vast and meticulously planned that it was believed to be the terrestrial counterpart of the celestial realm. This is the Forbidden City in Beijing, a sprawling complex of nearly 1,000 buildings that served as the imperial palace for 5 centuries. Its crimson walls and golden roofs are iconic, yet our 18th Untold myth reveals that its true foundation was not brick and mortar, but something far more subtle and potent, a network of invisible energy channels known as dragon lines. In the ancient Chinese practice of Feng Shui, which translates to wind and water, the earth itself is a living body crisscrossed by meridians of vital energy or Qi, similar to the energy lines in the human body. These powerful currents were called dragon lines because the dragon symbolized the ultimate embodiment of this terrestrial power, a force that could bestow prosperity, longevity, and divine right to rule. The foundational myth of the Forbidden City is that it was not built just anywhere. It was precisely positioned by master geomancers at the nexus of the most powerful dragon lines converging from the mountains north of Beijing. The entire city of Beijing was planned as a cosmic diagram, with the Forbidden City as its sacred, beating heart. The primary dragon line was believed to run directly from the Jingshan Hill, just north of the palace, through its central axis and all the way south through the city's gates. This was not a metaphorical alignment. It was seen as a literal conduit channeling the potent Qi from the protective northern mountains. The Kunlun Mountains were considered the spine of the world, dragon directly into the throne of the Son of Heaven, the Emperor. His mandate to rule was not just a political claim, it was an energetic one, dependent on his ability to reside at this perfect confluence of earthly and cosmic forces. The meticulous design of the complex served to harness, amplify, and protect this flow of energy. Every element, from the grandest hall to the smallest decorative detail, had a geomantic purpose. The golden roofs, for instance, were not just for show. The color yellow represented the center of the universe and the element of earth in Chinese cosmology, acting as a symbolic attractor for celestial energy. The many guardian lion statues placed at gateways were not merely decorative. They were spiritual sentinels believed to ward off negative, disruptive energies that might travel along lesser lines and corrupt the pure Qi of the central axis. The principles of Feng Shui employed in the Forbidden City's construction represent one of the most sophisticated applications of sacred architecture in history. The entire layout is a masterpiece of symbolic and energetic balance, governed by the principles of yin and yang and the 5 elements. The complex is perfectly oriented on a north-south axis, with the most important ceremonial halls facing south. This orientation allowed the emperor to sit with his back to the dark, cold yin energy of the north, symbolized by the dark turtle, while facing the bright, warm yang energy of the south, associated with the red phoenix. This positioned him in harmony with the fundamental forces of the universe. Water, representing wealth and flow, was strategically introduced via the Golden Water River, which curves in a gentle, auspicious arc in front of the main ceremonial halls. In Feng Shui, straight lines create secret arrows of negative energy, so the river was deliberately designed to meander, gathering and stabilizing positive Qi before it entered the palace grounds. The 5 elements wood, fire, earth, metal, and water were physically manifested throughout the city. The wooden structures of the buildings represented the wood element, the red painted walls symbolized fire, the yellow glazed tiles embodied earth, the bronze incense burners and statues represented metal, and the man-made streams and the great jars of water stored for firefighting represented the water element. This created a self-reinforcing, harmonious cycle of energy within the walls, a microcosm of a perfectly balanced universe. This terrestrial harmony was mirrored in a profound celestial alignment. The Forbidden City was designed as a mirror of the northern sky, particularly the purple forbidden enclosure, the celestial realm around the North Star, which was considered the eternal, unmoving palace of the celestial emperor. The Chinese name for the Forbidden City, Zhijiancheng, literally means Purple Forbidden City, directly linking it to this heavenly domain. The emperor's throne was placed along the central axis in exact alignment with the North Star Polaris. Just as all other stars in the northern sky appear to revolve around the unmoving pole star, so too would all earthly affairs revolve around the unmoving, central authority of the emperor. This cosmic connection was reaffirmed through ritual. The emperor would perform ceremonies at the Temple of Heaven to the south, a complex designed with circles to represent heaven, and at the Temple of Earth to the north, with squares to represent the earth, physically enacting his role as the conduit between the celestial and terrestrial realms. His every movement within the palace, from the Hall of Supreme Harmony where he held court to the private living quarters, was choreographed to maintain his alignment with these cosmic currents. The immense spiritual and political stakes of this geomantic arrangement gave rise to the most chilling part of the myth, the unwavering belief that disturbing these dragon lines would lead directly to the collapse of the dynasty. The emperor's mandate of heaven was seen as conditional, dependent on his virtue and his ability to maintain cosmic order, which was physically represented by the unimpeded flow of Kai through the Forbidden City. Any major disruption to this flow, whether from a poorly conceived renovation, the construction of a competing building that blocked a dragon line, or even a powerful negative event within the palace walls, was interpreted as a sign that the emperor had lost heaven's favor. There are historical anecdotes that, while debated, powerfully illustrate this belief. One story from the late Ming dynasty suggests that when the financially struggling emperor melted down metal statues and artifacts from the palace to mint coins, he was warned by his geomancers that he was disrupting the metal element's balance, thereby severing a vital energetic connection and weakening the dynasty's structural integrity. Shortly thereafter, the Ming fell to Manchu invaders who established the Qing dynasty. The Qing emperors, acutely aware of this myth, were famously vigilant about maintaining the Forbidden City's feng shui. They made additions and renovations, but always in consultation with geomancers to ensure they complemented and strengthened the existing energy lines rather than cutting across them. The ultimate validation of the myth for many came in the 20th century. As the Qing dynasty weakened and finally fell in 1912, the Forbidden City's perfect geomantic order was fundamentally broken. The central axis was pierced by new roads, modern buildings rose around it, disrupting the mountain-to-palace energy flow, and the emperor himself was evicted from his cosmic throne. To those who believe in the power of dragon lines, this was not a coincidence. It was the visible manifestation of a severed celestial mandate, a demonstration that the empire's fate was truly written in the invisible currents of the earth over which it was so carefully built. Our journey now takes us deep into the humid jungles of Chiapas, Mexico, to the Maya city of Palenque, where a single pyramid holds a mystery that has ignited debates for decades. This is the Temple of the Inscriptions, the final resting place of the great Maya king Kainish Janab Pakal, or Pakal the Great. In 1952, after 4 years of meticulous excavation, archaeologist Alberto Roslulia made a stunning discovery: a hidden stairway deep within the pyramid leading to a crypt containing an immense, elaborately carved sarcophagus lid. The official interpretation of this 5-ton slab of limestone is a masterpiece of Maya cosmology. It shows Pakal at the moment of his death, falling down the world tree, the Waka Chan, into the jaws of the underworld, ready to be reborn as a god. His journey is surrounded by celestial bands, cosmic monsters, and symbols of rebirth, a complex narrative of his divine transition. Yet, for a vocal group of alternative history enthusiasts, this explanation is a profound misreading. They see not a dying king but an ancient astronaut, In their view, Pakal is seated in a contoured seat, leaning forward intently, his hands manipulating controls, his foot on a pedal, and his nose seemingly attached to a breathing apparatus. The world tree becomes the fiery exhaust of a rocket, and the cosmic serpent at its base represents the craft's launch flames. This Palink astronaut theory, popularized by Erich von Däniken in the 1960s, argues that the Maya were visited by extraterrestrial beings who shared advanced technology, and that Pakal's tomb lid is a literal depiction of one of these celestial vehicles. However, there exists a far more untold and psychologically potent myth that has emerged from first-hand accounts of modern visitors, one that moves beyond ancient astronauts to suggest a different kind of advanced phenomenon. This is the legend of the temple as a time warp, a place sitting atop a temporal fault line where the barrier between the present and the Maya past becomes unnervingly thin. The sheer density of history at Palink is palpable. Pakal's reign in the 7th century was a golden age, and the temple itself is a chronicle in stone. Its walls and the sarcophagus sides covered in over 617 glyphs detailing his lineage and accomplishments. The myth proposes that such a powerful concentration of narrative energy, focused on a single, pivotal figure in a structure designed for eternal rest and rebirth, has left a unique kind of resonance. Those who subscribe to this idea point to the reports of sensitive individuals, tourists, artists, even a few anthropologists who have experienced inexplicable phenomena, particularly when alone in the confined space of the tomb chamber or standing silently at the pyramid's summit at dawn or dusk. The most common account is of lost time, where a visitor will feel they have been absorbed in contemplation for only a few minutes, only to check their watch and discover that over an hour has passed without their awareness. There is no feeling of dizziness or disorientation, simply a seamless slip in the continuity of their perception. More dramatic are the visions, which are never described as full-blown hallucinations, but rather as vivid, immersive sensory overlays. One recurring story involves a woman from Spain who, while sitting on the steps of the temple, suddenly found the lush green jungle vista replaced by a vision of the city in its heyday. She described hearing the distant sounds of a bustling marketplace, smelling wood smoke and copal incense, and seeing figures in elaborate white cotton garments and towering jade headdresses moving along the plaza below. The vision lasted only seconds, but the sensory detail was overwhelming. Another account from a British photographer tells of trying to capture the perfect light on the temple's roof comb when he momentarily saw the stonework not as a ruin, but as a brilliantly painted structure of red, blue, and yellow, with its sculpted figures looking pristine and new. These experiences are almost always passive and fleeting, like a radio signal from the past briefly breaking through the static of the present. The theory explaining these phenomena is as speculative as it is fascinating. It suggests that the temple, through its precise astronomical alignments and its function as a permanent vessel for a king's powerful life force, acts as a kind of natural recording device. The limestone of the region, rich with quartz and other crystalline structures, could theoretically act as a medium for storing energetic information, much like a stone tape. Under the right conditions, specific atmospheric pressure, solar angles, or even the visitor's own mental state of quiet receptivity, this recorded memory might briefly play back, creating a temporal echo that a perceptive individual can tune into. This myth transforms the Temple of the Inscriptions from a static archaeological site into a dynamic, interactive portal, a place that doesn't just tell the story of Pakal the Great, but occasionally, for a fleeting moment, allows you to step directly into it. Leaving behind the echoing halls of Palink, we now travel to the eastern coast of India, to a temple where the divine is not a distant memory or a carved image, but a living, breathing presence that requires the same care as a mortal body. This is the Jagannath Temple in Puri, Odisha, and our 20th Untold myth centers on the radical belief that its three central deities, Lord Jagannath, his brother Balabhadra, and their sister Subhadra are not symbolic idols but conscious, living entities that experience the cycles of life, death, and rebirth. To millions of devotees, these large, wide-eyed wooden figures are not representations of the divine. They are the divine in a tangible, accessible form. Their uniquely rustic and unfinished appearance, with large circular eyes and stunted limbs, is not a stylistic choice but a reflection of a profound theological concept, that God is all-encompassing and cannot be perfectly captured by human artistry. The most astonishing manifestation of this belief is the Nabakhelbara ritual, a spectacular event that occurs only once every 12 to 19 years. The name itself translates to new body, and it is exactly that, the conscious transference of the divine essence, or Brahma Padartha, from the old, decaying wooden bodies of the deities into newly carved ones. The timing is not arbitrary. It is determined by a complex astrological calculation based on the lunar calendar, requiring 2 consecutive months of an extra-lunar cycle known as Adhik Mars. When this celestial alignment occurs, the entire temple town of Puri erupts into a state of both mourning and celebration, marking the most sacred and secretive event in the Hindu religious calendar. The entire process begins with a sacred and mysterious quest to find the new divine wood known as the Daru. This is not a simple lumber expedition. 4 specially appointed teams of temple servitors, known as Datapotis, who are believed to be descendants of the original tribal worshippers of the deity, embark on a pilgrimage to locate 4 specific mature neem trees. The search is guided by a set of ancient, esoteric instructions. The chosen neem tree for Lord Jagannath himself must be located near a cremation ground, have a dark hue, be accompanied by an ant hill and a snake hole at its base, and be marked with the symbols of a conch, discus, club, and lotus, the divine weapons of Vishnu, of whom Jagannath is a form. The trees for Balabhadra and Subhadra have their own distinct set of signs. The belief is that the divine has already chosen the tree. The Datapoti's role is merely to discover it. When a potential tree is found, the entire area is purified, and the head priest performs a ritual to ask the tree for permission to be used for the Lord's new body. The selection is confirmed by a series of auspicious omens, such as the sound of a temple gong from a distant village or the sudden appearance of certain animals. The felling of the tree is itself a deeply emotional ceremony, witnessed by thousands of devotees who weep as if witnessing a real death. For in their eyes, the tree is not just wood, but a vessel already imbued with the divine presence. Once the 4 massive dauras are transported to the temple in a grand procession, they are taken inside the temple and the complex, secretive work of carving the new deities begins. For nearly 2 weeks, the temple is closed to the public, its gates sealed and guarded. Inside, a select group of carpenters from a specific lineage, working blindfolded and with their hands wrapped in cloth, carve the new bodies following age-old measurements and designs. The most profound and absolute secret of the entire ritual occurs during this period, the transfer of the Brahma Padartha. This term refers to a sacred, uncategorized substance that resides within the cavity of the old idol of Jagannath. What this substance actually is remains one of Hinduism's greatest mysteries. Some believe it is the heart of the original deity, perhaps a piece of Lord Krishna's cremated body. Others speculate it is a powerful, naturally formed salagram stone, or a combination of rare herbs and gems. Whatever it is considered to be the very soul of the deity, the source of its consciousness and power. In the dead of night, in a ceremony shielded even from the eyes of most priests, the chief Datapotis perform the transfer. The old and new idols are placed side by side. The Brahma Padartha is removed from the old idol and immediately placed into the new one, in a ritual believed to be so potent that witnessing it unprepared could be fatal. Immediately after this transfer, the old idols are considered to be lifeless shells and are buried in the temple's inner sanctum, the Koili Vaikuntha, or the Garden of Heaven. This burial is a somber affair performed with the same rites as a human cremation, completing the cycle of death for the old form. The power of this living idol myth is not confined to esoteric rituals. It fuels the daily, vibrant faith of millions. Devotees do not see a static piece of wood. They see a deity that eats, sleeps, and feels. The daily schedule at the Jagannath temple is that of a royal court tending to a living king. The deities are awakened with a morning song, offered breakfast, lunch, and dinner, elaborate multi-course meals known as Mahaprasad, and put to sleep at night with a lullaby. They change their clothes multiple times a day and even take a ritualistic bath during the Devasnana Purnima festival. This belief in a tangible, accessible God creates an intimacy between the devotee and the divine that is rare in world religions. The famous annual Rath Yatra, or chariot festival, where the three deities are pulled on colossal chariots through the streets of Puri, is understood not as a procession of idols, but as a literal journey of the deities to their garden palace. Millions of pilgrims flock to Puri for this event, believing that a mere glimpse of Lord Jagannath on his chariot can liberate them from the cycle of birth and death. The myth of the living idol, constantly renewed through the Nabakhelbara, ensures that this faith remains evergreen. It is a powerful declaration that the divine is not a remote historical figure, but a living reality that experiences time alongside its devotees, aging, dying, and being reborn in an eternal cycle that mirrors the very universe it is believed to govern. But our exploration of the untold does not end with living idols. It now takes us to the very edge of the desert, to a monument that has guarded its secrets for millennia under the unblinking gaze of the sun. Gazing out across the Giza Plateau, the Great Sphinx is an icon of mystery, a colossal fusion of human intelligence and leonine power carved directly from the living bedrock. While Egyptology tells us it was built by the Pharaoh Khafre around 2,500 years before the Common Era, a potent and persistent legend insists this is only the most recent chapter in a much older story. This is the 21st untold myth, the belief that deep beneath the Sphinx's massive paws lies a hidden library of a lost world, the fabled Hall of Records. This is not envisioned as a treasure trove of gold, but as an archive of crystal tablets or sacred scrolls containing the entire knowledge of a sophisticated civilization, most often linked to the legendary Atlantis, preserved here before their continent sank beneath the waves. The modern incarnation of this myth was powerfully catalyzed by the American psychic Edgar Cayce in the early 20th century. In a series of trance readings, Cayce described not only the existence of this hall but its impending discovery. He claimed the Sphinx was actually built around 10,500 before the Common Era by refugees from Atlantis, and that a hidden entrance, located between its paws and flanked by a movable stone, would be found. He prophesied that the hall would be revealed when the time was right, specifically mentioning the late 1990s, and that it would contain the history of human origin and the true story of the lost continent. Cayce's detailed visions, followed by thousands, transformed the Sphinx from an archaeological puzzle into a beacon for New Age seekers and alternative historians, creating a compelling narrative that the answers to humanity's greatest questions were waiting just out of sight. Fueling this fire are the very real but often misunderstood tunnels and cavities that do indeed exist within and beneath the Sphinx. Geological surveys, including seismic and ground-penetrating radar studies, have consistently indicated the presence of anomalies and hollow spaces in the bedrock. There is a known small tunnel at the rear of the Sphinx, likely dug by treasure hunters in antiquity. Another shaft enters the top of its head, and a larger, rectangular chamber has been detected beneath the front left paw. Mainstream Egyptologists attribute most of these features to natural fissures in the limestone or to the work of ancient and modern explorers. For proponents of the Hall of Records, however, these are the tantalizing clues. They argue that the Egyptian authorities are either hiding the truth or are unwilling to conduct the invasive excavation needed to prove the legend. This standoff came to a head in the 1990s when a team led by geologist Dr. Robert Schoch and supported by proponents like John Anthony West conducted a seismic survey. They argued that the erosion patterns on the Sphinx's enclosure walls were caused not by wind and sand, but by thousands of years of heavy rainfall, which would date the monument to a time long before the established dynastic Egyptian era. While their conclusions are fiercely rejected by the majority of Egyptologists, their work added a layer of scientific controversy that made the myth all the more compelling to the public. So why does mainstream archaeology remain so deeply skeptical? The reasons are rooted in methodology and a lack of corroborating evidence. No inscription from any period of Egyptian history, including the extensive texts found in pyramids and tombs, ever mentions a hall of records or a library beneath the Sphinx. The Egyptians were meticulous record keepers, and the idea that they would build or adopt a monument of such immense spiritual significance without a single written reference to its true purpose strikes Egyptologists as highly improbable. Furthermore, every time one of the known cavities has been investigated, the results have been mundane. The chamber under the paw, when explored by a camera-equipped robot, was found to be a small, empty dead end. The focus of academic research has shifted to understanding the Sphinx within its clear and proven cultural context. As a solar symbol and a divine guardian of the Giza necropolis, intimately connected to the cult of the sun god and the resurrection of the pharaoh. Yet the mystery endures with a power that facts alone cannot dispel. The Sphinx itself is the reason. Its immense, weathered presence inspires awe. Its missing nose and the enigmatic, almost knowing expression on its face provoke endless speculation. The myth of the Hall of Records resonates because it speaks to a profound human hope that our history is deeper and more magnificent than we know, and that a lost golden age of wisdom is not entirely lost but merely waiting, safely stored in a hidden vault, for the day we are wise enough to find it. It transforms the Giza Plateau from a royal cemetery into a cosmic safe deposit box, suggesting that the true purpose of this ancient wonder was not just to mark a pharaoh's tomb, but to preserve the very soul of a forgotten world for the future of all humanity. From the silent, sun-scorched sands of Giza, we journey now to a world of vibrant color and fervent devotion, to a temple that resembles a colossal, living storybook carved from stone. In the ancient city of Madurai in southern India, the Meenakshi Amman temple rises like a fantastical fortress, its towering gopurams encrusted with 1,000 brightly painted stucco deities, each one silently narrating an episode from Hindu mythology. This temple is not just a place of worship, it is the spiritual and cultural heart of the city, dedicated to the goddess Meenakshi, a form of Parvati, and her consort Lord Sundeshwara, a form of Shiva. For centuries, it has been a center of immense wealth, receiving offerings of gold, jewels, and land from kings, merchants, and countless devotees. But woven into this tapestry of faith and opulence is a much darker thread. The 22nd of our untold myths, the chilling legend of the cursed sapphire of Meenakshi. This is not merely a story of a stolen gem. It is a profound narrative about the sacred nature of divine property and the terrifying consequences of violating it, a theme deeply rooted in the concept of parigraha, or the sin of misappropriating that which belongs to the gods. According to the lore, which is passed down in hushed tones by temple priests and local elders, the sapphire was no ordinary jewel. It was a flawless, pigeon-excised blue sapphire of such deep, celestial color that it was believed to be a teardrop of the goddess Meenakshi herself, solidified over eons of meditation. It was set into the eye of a principal statue of the goddess within the sanctum, not as mere decoration, but as a vital component of the deity's spiritual presence. In Hindu temple tradition, the rituals of prana pratishtha infuse the idol with the living breath of the divine, making the deity a conscious inhabitant of the form. The jewels adorning the idol are thus not external ornaments but integral parts of that divine body. To remove one is not theft in the mundane sense, it is a form of spiritual mutilation, a violent severing of a part of the goddess's very being. The legend states that in the late 18th century, during a period of political turmoil as the Nyack dynasty's power waned and European colonial forces began to exert influence, a ruthless mercenary commander, some versions say a French soldier, others a renegade British officer, managed to bribe his way into the temple's inner chambers during a chaotic festival night. He pried the magnificent blue sapphire from the deity's eye, pocketing a piece of the goddess herself. It is said the moment the gem left the sanctum, a collective shiver ran through the temple's resident peacocks, and the sacred temple elephants trumpeted in distress as if sensing a profound violation. The thief, however, felt only the thrill of his prize, utterly unaware that he had just attached an invisible, divine chain of retribution to his soul. The alleged journey of the sapphire from that point forward reads like a chronicle of curated catastrophe, a trail of misfortune meticulously laid out by the hand of an offended goddess. The mercenary, the story goes, did not live to enjoy his loot. He was found dead just days later in a Madurai alleyway, the cause of his death a mystery, but the sapphire was gone from his possession. The gem then supposedly surfaced in the collection of a wealthy Tamil merchant prince, a man known for his ruthless business practices. Within a year of his acquisition of the cursed blue, his shipping fleet was decimated by a sudden freak cyclone in the Bay of Bengal. His vast estates were consumed by a fire of unknown origin, and he died of a sudden, wasting illness that baffled his physicians. The sapphire, ever moving, was then said to have traveled to the court of a minor Maharaja in central India, a man infamous for his obsession with precious stones. He had the sapphire set into his ceremonial turban. On the very day he first wore it publicly, his favorite son was tragically killed in a hunting accident. Plagued by further financial ruin and family discord, the Maharaja finally became convinced of the jewel's malignant nature and allegedly sold it to a British colonial administrator, effectively passing the curse to a new continent and culture. This is where the myth of the Meenakshi sapphire intriguingly intersects with the wider world of famous cursed jewels, particularly those that made their way to the West. While definitive proof is lost to time, some gemologists and historians of the esoteric have drawn parallels between the descriptions of the Meenakshi stone and other famously ill-fated blue gems like the Hope diamond. The Hope diamond, a massive blue diamond with its own long history of theft, revolution, and tragedy, serves as a powerful Western counterpart to our Indian legend. The similarities are striking. Both are spectacular blue stones with origins in sacred or royal Asian settings. Both were acquired through violence or deceit, and both accumulated a grim reputation for bringing despair, bankruptcy, and untimely death to their owners. For believers, this is not a coincidence but a universal principle. It suggests that certain objects of immense beauty and spiritual significance carry a kind of ethical weight. When they are rightfully placed in a context of reverence, as in a temple or a legitimate royal treasury, their energy is balanced and benevolent. But once wrenched from that sacred context through an act of greed, they become a focal point for karmic rebalancing, actively attracting misfortune to correct the moral disorder their theft represents. The curse is not seen as a petty spell cast by a vengeful deity, but as the intrinsic, natural consequence of the act of desecration itself, a cosmic law of cause and effect playing out with grim predictability. The power of this myth ultimately stems from its deep roots in Hindu temple lore and the philosophy of Deva Dravya, property belonging to the divine. In this worldview, the wealth of a temple is not owned by any human, not even the king. It is held in trust for the deity who is the true sovereign. Every gold coin, every silk garment, and every gemstone is an offering, a sacred loan from the devotee to God, and it remains divine property in perpetuity. The temple account books themselves are considered sacred texts. To steal from this treasury is considered one of the gravest sins, a direct affront to the cosmic order. The curses that follow are detailed in various Puranas and local Esthala Puranas, the chronicles of specific holy places. They speak of thieves and their lineages being afflicted with poverty, disease, and the loss of progeny, punishments that strike at the core of earthly well-being. The legend of the Meenakshi sapphire is a dramatic, personalized manifestation of this ancient and deeply held belief. It serves as a powerful cautionary tale, a narrative device that reinforces the social and spiritual contract protecting these centers of faith. It reminds every devotee, from the humble farmer to the powerful monarch, that the goddess's gaze is all-seeing and her property is inviolable. The sapphire, wherever it may be, is not just a gem. It is a celestial warrant for justice, and its curse is the eternal echo of a single, irreverent act that tore a piece of the divine from its rightful home. What happens when architecture is designed not just to inspire awe, but to instill a deep, primal fear? We journey now from the cursed jewels of India to the sun-baked limestone plains of the Yucatan Peninsula, home to the magnificent and imposing city of Chichen Itza. Here, the Temple of Kukulkan, also known as El Castillo, stands as a monumental testament to Maya astronomical genius, famously casting the shadowy serpent of the equinox down its staircase. But our 23rd Untold myth descends into a far more chilling aspect of this pyramid, suggesting its true purpose was not just celestial observation, but a form of psychological warfare. Local legends and persistent oral histories speak of a harrowing acoustic phenomenon, that the pyramid's very structure was engineered to act as a giant amplifier, specifically designed to capture and magnify the dying screams of sacrificial victims, projecting them across the entire ceremonial plaza to shatter the nerves of the assembled populace and reinforce the ultimate authority of priestly class. The architectural evidence for this is both startling and measurable. The temple is a masterwork of acoustic engineering that modern researchers are still analyzing with a sense of disbelief. If you stand at the base of the grand staircase and clap your hands, the sound doesn't just echo. It returns as a piercing, distorted chirp that closely resembles the call of the sacred Quetzal bird. While this is often presented as a charming curiosity, the same acoustic principles could be applied to far more terrifying sounds. The pyramid's steep, high staircases act like massive stone sound reflectors. The precise angle and texture of each step are thought to create a diffraction grating effect, breaking complex sounds like a human scream into their constituent frequencies and reflecting them with unnatural clarity. Furthermore, the temple's interior chambers and the hollow spaces within its construction may have acted as resonant cavities, much like the body of a guitar, adding bass and volume to the sound. This isn't merely speculative. Acoustic studies have confirmed that sound travels with remarkable efficiency from the summit directly to the Great Ball Court located to the northeast. A voice raised at the top of the temple can be heard with startling clarity hundreds of meters away on the ball court floor, a place where thousands would have gathered for the ritual ball game, an event that itself sometimes culminated in sacrifice. The myth posits that this was no accident. The Maya architects, with their profound understanding of mathematics and physics, intentionally designed this sonic funnel, turning the entire sacred complex into a colossal public address system for broadcasting the ultimate price of defying the gods or the state. To understand why such a horrific application of science would be necessary, we must confront the historical and cultural reality of human sacrifice at Chichen Itza. While popular culture often fixates on the practice, the full context is crucial. For the Maya, offering life to the gods was the highest form of devotion. They believed the gods had shed their own blood to create the world and humanity, and this sacred debt needed to be repaid with the most precious substance available, human life. To ensure the sun would rise, the rains would come, and the cosmic order would continue. The sacred cenote, the massive natural sinkhole at Chichen Itza, provides grim archaeological evidence. Dredging operations over the last century have recovered the remains of over 200 individuals, mostly men and children, along with a treasure trove of gold, jade, and other offerings tossed into the murky waters as gifts to the rain god Chak. While many of these were likely already deceased when offered, Spanish chroniclers and Maya codices also depict heart extraction atop pyramids. The victim, often a high-status captive of war, would be held down on a stone altar by 4 Chaks or priests, while a 5th priest, the Nakam, would open the chest with an obsidian knife and offer the still-beating heart to the heavens. It was a moment of extreme, concentrated violence, a potent release of spiritual energy that was believed to sustain the universe. This is where the acoustic myth converges with the political and spiritual mechanics of Maya society. The scream of a sacrificial victim in their final moments was not just a cry of agony. In the Maya worldview, it was a potent, sacred sound. It was the sound of a soul being violently torn from its body, a moment of ultimate transition that created a conduit between the human world and the realm of the gods. By amplifying this sound, the priests were not merely terrorizing the crowd, they were magnifying the spiritual power of the offering itself, broadcasting the moment of sacred exchange to ensure the gods were listening. On a more pragmatic level, it was a devastatingly effective tool of social control. Imagine the scene during a major festival. The plaza is packed with thousands of people, from the highest nobles to the lowest commoners. The air is thick with incense and the rhythmic beat of drums. Then from the summit of the towering, inaccessible pyramid comes a single, blood-curdling scream. The sound, warped and amplified by the stone, seems to come from everywhere at once, filling the entire sacred space, impossible to ignore or escape. For a member of the populace, this auditory assault would have been psychologically shattering. It viscerally demonstrated the absolute power of the ruling elite, who held the power of life and death literally echoing from the heavens. It reinforced the consequences of disobedience, ensuring that the memory of that sound would linger long after the festival ended, a haunting reminder of the price of dissent. The sonic terror was likely combined with potent visual symbolism. The victim's body may have been tumbled down the steep northern staircase, the same one that later births the Serpent of Light during the equinox, creating a gruesome counterpoint to the celestial phenomenon. In this way, the Temple of Kukulkan was far more than a calendar in stone. It was a multidimensional instrument of power. It harnessed the light of the sun, the precision of mathematics, and the raw, amplified terror of human suffering to cement a world where the priest-king's authority was as immutable and terrifying as the pyramid itself, a force of nature that demanded obedience through a symphony of fear. And now we step from the echoing terror of Chichen Itza into a realm of stunning, almost blinding purity. Our journey brings us to the lush landscapes of northern Thailand, to a temple that seems to have been sculpted from ice and starlight. This is Wat Rong Kun, more famously known as the White Temple. Unlike the ancient ruins we have explored, this is a modern marvel, a work in progress conceived and built by the Thai visual artist Chalamchai Kosatpipat, beginning in 1997. The temple is a radical departure from traditional Thai architecture, a dazzling, entirely white structure intricately inlaid with countless pieces of mirrored glass that shimmer and sparkle, representing the Buddha's purity and wisdom. But as you approach this celestial vision, your path is flanked by a writhing, formidable army of sculpted forms. These are the Nagas, the mythical serpent beings of Buddhist and Hindu lore, and they form the core of our 24th Untold myth. The widespread belief, fervently held by locals and nurtured by the artist himself, is that these ornate serpentine statues are not passive decorations. They are active spiritual guardians, believed to awaken from their stone slumber under the cover of darkness to protect the temple's sacred grounds from any and all malevolent forces. To understand the profound significance of these guardians, one must first grasp the Naga's deep and complex role in Southeast Asian spirituality. In Buddhist cosmology, Nagas are powerful, semi-divine beings that inhabit the watery underworld. They are often depicted as great, multi-headed serpents, and they are ambivalent figures capable of bestowing great boons and protection, but also of unleashing devastating floods and wrath if disrespected. One of the most important stories involves the Naga king, Muchalinda. After the Buddha achieved enlightenment, a tremendous storm arose. Muchalinda emerged from the roots of the Bodhi tree, coiled his massive body 7 times around the meditating Buddha, and spread his great hood over the enlightened one's head, shielding him from the raging elements for 7 days. This act transformed the Naga from a potentially dangerous creature into a definitive symbol of protection for the Buddha and his teachings. At Wat Rong Kun, this protective role is physically manifested in the most dramatic way possible. Before you can even cross the bridge to the main Ubosat or ordination hall, you must pass through a surreal sculpture garden that represents the cycle of samsara or rebirth. Your way is lined with dozens of outreaching hands symbolizing uncontrolled desire, and then you are confronted by the 2 immense coiling Naga serpents that form the balustrades of the bridge itself. To cross this bridge is to symbolically cross from the realm of suffering and temptation into the realm of the Buddha, and the Nagas are the majestic, watchful gatekeepers of this spiritual transition. Their presence is a constant, powerful reminder that the path to enlightenment is guarded by potent, divine forces. This symbolic role blossoms into a living, breathing myth under the cloak of night. As the last tourists depart and the temple falls silent, a different kind of energy is said to descend upon Wat Rong Kun. Local residents, particularly those living in the villages that border the temple grounds, speak of the phenomenon with quiet certainty. They report seeing subtle movements in the shadows where the Naga statues stand, a shifting of forms that is more felt than seen. Some speak of hearing a low, resonant hiss like the sound of wind, yet the leaves on the trees remain perfectly still. The most common accounts involve the temple's security animals. Watchdogs that patrol the area are said to behave strangely after dark, sometimes whimpering and cowering, or staring intently at the base of a Naga statue as if fixed on something invisible to human eyes, their tails tucked between their legs in a display of primal fear or respect. One particularly vivid story, often shared by a retired night watchman, involves a night when he believed he saw a would-be vandal attempting to deface one of the smaller Naga figures on the temple perimeter. He described how, just as the man raised his tool, the seemingly solid statue appeared to twist its head ever so slightly, its stone eyes gleaming with an inner light that was not a reflection. The would-be vandal reportedly screamed, dropped his tools, and fled in a panic, never to return. Whether these experiences are products of suggestion, the play of moonlight on mirrored glass, or something more, they are undeniably real to those who experience them, weaving a modern folklore around a very ancient belief. The undeniable power of this myth is inextricably linked to the vision of the temple's creator, Chalamchai Kosatpipat. He did not set out to simply reconstruct an old temple. He aimed to build a physical bridge between the material world and the spiritual realm, a 3-dimensional meditation on Buddhist principles for the modern age. Every single element of Wat Rong Kun is intensely intentional, from the white color representing purity to the mirrored glass symbolizing the Buddha's wisdom reflecting back on the universe. The Nagas in his grand design are a crucial component of this bridge. In interviews, the artist has explicitly stated that he views the temple as a living entity and that the Naga statues are infused with protective energy. He designed them not as inert museum pieces, but as vessels for divine presence, as active participants in the temple's spiritual ecosystem. This is not merely a legend that grew organically around an old structure. It is a myth consciously fostered and embedded into the very foundation of a contemporary work of art. The artist's intention gives the local stories a profound weight, suggesting that the belief in the living Nagas is not a superstition, but an integral part of the temple's intended function. It is a rare and powerful example of a modern artist successfully channeling ancient archetypes to create a space that feels genuinely numinous, a place where the boundary between myth and reality is deliberately and beautifully blurred. The guardians of Wat Rong Kun stand as a testament to the enduring power of these ancient symbols, proving that even in our modern world, the need for divine protection and the belief in the beings that provide it remains as vital as ever. And so we arrive at our final destination, a place that represents the very heart of one of the world's great religions, yet rests upon a foundation of spiritual conflict so deep it has become the stuff of legend. We stand now in Vatican City beneath the soaring dome of St. Peter's Basilica. This monumental church, a triumph of Renaissance architecture, is believed by the faithful to be built directly over the burial place of St. Peter, the chief apostle of Jesus Christ. Its sacred aura is undeniable, a global epicenter of Christian pilgrimage and power. But our 25th and final untold myth pulls back the layers of hallowed ground to reveal a far more complex and contentious origin. The persistent legend states that the foundations of this most Catholic of sites are not solely Christian, but are physically and spiritually anchored in the ruins of an ancient Mithraic temple and a sprawling pagan necropolis, and that the echoes of these competing faiths have never truly faded. It is believed that the spirits of early Christian martyrs and the ghosts of pagan Mithraic initiates still engage in a silent, eternal struggle for spiritual dominion over this profoundly sacred land. The historical and archaeological evidence for this layered past is both compelling and concrete. The Vatican Hill in the time of ancient Rome was far from a prestigious address. It was an area of gardens and villas, but also the location of a sprawling necropolis, a city of the dead that ran along the Via Cornelia. This was not a secret, it was a public cemetery, and its existence is a critical piece of the puzzle. In the 1940s, ordered by Pope Pius XII to investigate the traditional tomb of St. Peter, archaeologists began a painstaking excavation directly beneath the basilica's main altar. What they uncovered was astonishing, a complete Roman street of tombs known as the Vatican necropolis, dating from the 1st to the 4th centuries. They found beautifully decorated mausoleums belonging to wealthy Roman families, filled with sarcophagi, frescoes, and inscriptions to pagan gods. But nestled within this pagan city of the dead was something extraordinary, a simple, humble grave from the 1st century that had become a focal point of veneration. Around this modest tomb, early Christians had built a small shrine known as the Trophy of Gaius, and later, the Emperor Constantine constructed the first St. Peter's Basilica directly over it, deliberately orienting the entire building to center on this one venerated spot. This act of building a church over a pre-existing sacred site, known as Interpretatio Christiana, was common practice, a way to sanctify a pagan landscape and signal the triumph of the new faith over the old. But the most tantalizing piece of evidence for our myth came from excavations near the Vatican sacristy, where the remains of a Mithraeum were discovered. Mithraism was a fiercely popular mystery cult among Roman soldiers, a secretive, all-male religion centered on the god Mithras, often depicted slaying a celestial bull. Their temples were always subterranean, cave-like structures designed to resemble the cosmos. The presence of a Mithraeum directly adjacent to the Christian veneration site suggests the Vatican Hill was a spiritual battleground long before the first cathedral was ever conceived, a place where two competing savior cults literally existed in the shadows beneath the earth, vying for the souls of the Roman world. This physical layering of faiths gives rise to the most haunting aspect of the myth, the alleged ongoing spiritual contention. The belief is not that the site is simply haunted, but that it is a place of unresolved spiritual energy where the powerful devotions of two different worlds continue to resonate. Those who work within the basilica, particularly after-hours sextons, Swiss guards on their quiet patrols, and restoration workers have whispered for generations of inexplicable phenomena that seem to reflect this ancient divide. Some accounts speak of a palpable, martial energy near the excavated Mithraeum area, a feeling of intense, disciplined focus, the faint scent of male incense, and even the distant, rhythmic murmur of chanted prayers in a long-forgotten tongue. This is interpreted as the lingering presence of the Mithraic initiates who underwent rigorous trials in their quest for salvation. In stark contrast, other experiences are described as profoundly sorrowful and sacrificial. There are reports from visitors and clergy of suddenly feeling an overwhelming sense of grief and pity in the vicinity of the Confessio, the area directly over Peter's traditional tomb, accompanied by a chill in the air and the fleeting vision of figures in tattered, simple robes, echoes, perhaps, of the early Christians who risked everything to venerate their martyred leader in a hostile, pagan world. The myth suggests these energies are not at peace. They are in a state of tension, a permanent spiritual stalemate beneath the marble and gold. This is not a battle of good versus evil in a simple sense, but a clash of two powerful, salvation-oriented worldviews that both claimed this patch of earth as their own. Their devotions so intense they have, in a sense, become permanently imprinted upon the location. Ultimately, the power of this final untold myth lies in what it reveals about the true nature of sacred spaces. St. Peter's Basilica, in its overwhelming grandeur, presents a face of unified, unquestioned faith. But its foundations tell a more complex and human story, one of suppression, appropriation, and spiritual competition. The early church did not build on empty land. It deliberately built over its pagan predecessors, both to claim their power and to erase their memory. This practice was a fundamental part of establishing Christian dominance across the Roman Empire. The myth of the contending spirits forces us to acknowledge that this process of conversion was not always clean or complete. It suggests that the old gods and the old ways do not simply vanish. Their echoes linger in the stone, in the soil, and in the collective unconscious of a place. The Vatican Hill is a perfect microcosm of this universal truth. It is a physical archive of religious evolution where a pagan cemetery, a secretive soldier cult, and a burgeoning world religion all converged, one layer built directly upon the last. The legend endures because it speaks to a deeper, more nuanced history than the official narrative often allows. It reminds us that the places we hold as most sacred are rarely pure. They are palimpsests, written and rewritten by different hands across the centuries, each layer adding its own voice to a silent, eternal chorus of faith, struggle, and the unyielding human search for the divine. After traversing this astonishing landscape of hidden whispers, celestial guardians, and forgotten technologies, we are left with a profound and compelling question: why? Why do these particular stories cling so tenaciously to these stones, outliving empires and outlasting entire civilizations? The answer lies not in the myths themselves, but in the unique and powerful nature of the spaces that birthed them. A sacred temple is far more than an arrangement of stone and mortar. It is a place where the ordinary rules of the world are believed to bend, a location designated by humanity as a meeting point between the earthly and the divine. Scholars of religion call this a hierophany, a rupture in the fabric of the mundane where the sacred violently or gently erupts into our world. Think of Moses before the burning bush, a simple desert plant that became a conduit for the voice of God. In the same way, a temple is a permanent, institutionalized hierophany. The ground upon which it stands is considered holy not because of the building, but because the building marks a spot where something transcendent once occurred or continuously occurs. This inherent, perceived thinness of the veil makes these sites natural incubators for the extraordinary. When you believe a location is a direct channel to the gods, is it any wonder that stories emerge of speaking stones, prophetic mirrors, and gateways to other worlds? The human mind, confronted with the overwhelming awe of such a place, instinctively reaches for narratives that match the scale of the emotion it feels. The sheer, staggering immensity of the Great Pyramid or the serene perfection of Borobudur's geometry demands an explanation that transcends mere quarrying and carving. A story of divine architects or enlightened giants doesn't just explain how it was built. It validates the profound, unsettling sense of wonder that the site inspires in us. These myths are the spiritual and psychological vocabulary we use to describe the indescribable. Beyond explaining the unexplainable, these stories serve a crucial, practical function. They are the guardians of the sacred. In a world without security cameras or alarm systems, how do you protect a site of immense spiritual and material wealth? You weave a protective shroud of narrative. The curse of the Emerald Buddha or the vengeful spirits of the Templo Maya are not merely spooky tales. They are sophisticated, pre-modern security protocols. A story about a thief being struck down by an invisible force or a dynasty falling because it disrupted a dragon line is a powerful deterrent. It socializes protection, making every believer a potential enforcer of the temple's sanctity through their belief in the consequences. This protective function extends beyond physical theft to the preservation of moral and ritual purity. The intricate rules governing the Vestal Virgins or the specific protocols for approaching the oracle at Delphi were reinforced by myths of catastrophic outcomes for any deviation. The story of the hanging pillar at the Virabhadra temple, left as a divine lesson in humility, subtly instructs all visitors on the proper attitude of reverence. In this way, mythology becomes the enforcement mechanism for a site's spiritual etiquette, ensuring that the sacred energy of the place remains unpolluted by human arrogance or impiety. These narratives also function as the living DNA of a culture, a resilient thread of identity that can survive conquest, famine, and the slow erosion of time. For the Thai people, the legend of the Emerald Buddha is inextricably linked to the legitimacy of the monarchy and the sovereignty of the nation itself. Its journey from Laos to Thailand is not just a historical event, it is a foundational myth that defines their cultural and political destiny. Similarly, the story of the submerged city of Dwarka is not an isolated fairy tale for the people of India. It is a tangible connection to the epic era of the Mahabharata, a physical proof of a golden age that anchors their spiritual heritage in the real, if submerged, world. When a culture is dispersed or its language is suppressed, these temple myths often remain as one of the last, most durable vessels of identity. They are passed down through generations not just as entertainment, but as sacred history, a coded map of who a people are, where they came from, and what they hold most dear. The myth becomes a portable homeland, allowing a culture to carry its essence with it even when its physical temples lie in ruins. Ultimately, the enduring power of these 25 untold myths reveals something fundamental about us as a species. We are storytelling creatures, and we use narrative to navigate the vast, terrifying, and beautiful mysteries of existence. A temple, in its perfect silence and staggering presence, presents one of the greatest of those mysteries. The myths we create about them are our collective attempt to have a conversation with that mystery, to reach across the chasm between the known and the unknown and find a handhold. They satisfy our deep-seated need for the world to be more than it appears, for history to be deeper, for magic to be possible, and for the divine to have a tangible address. These stories are not lies or simple superstitions. They are the profound and poetic truths of the human heart, etched not in stone, but in the timeless, ever-evolving language of wonder. They remind us that the greatest temple of all may be the human capacity for belief itself, an architecture of faith that can build bridges across centuries and find meaning in the silent gaze of a stone god. It is a testament to the raw, primal power of these ancient temple myths that they have not remained confined to dusty tomes or archaeological sites, but have instead erupted into the very heart of our modern entertainment. The same archetypes that captivated our ancestors, the cursed artifact, the booby-trapped labyrinth, the race for a power beyond comprehension, are now the driving force behind some of the most beloved stories in film and video games, proving that our collective fascination with sacred enigmas is as potent as ever. Think of Indiana Jones, arguably the most iconic purveyor of this genre. His adventures are a direct translation of these untold myths into cinematic spectacle. In Raiders of the Lost Ark, the quest is for the Ark of the Covenant, an object we explored in the Legend of Solomon's Hidden Library, believed to hold immense and terrifying power. The film's climax, where the Ark's divine energy is unleashed upon the Nazi villains, is a perfect Hollywood rendering of a curse myth, like that of the Meenakshi sapphire, where a sacred object violently punishes those who desecrate it with impure intentions. The booby-trapped temple, with its pressure plates, rolling boulders, and cunningly placed darts, is a direct descendant of the stories we've heard about the sophisticated traps, both physical and spiritual, said to guard places like the Hall of Records beneath the Sphinx. Jones doesn't just fight human opponents, he battles the very architecture of belief, a concept deeply rooted in the reality of ancient sites like the Mayan temples, where the design itself was a form of psychological and physical warfare. This archetypal language finds an even more immersive expression in the world of video games, where you don't just watch the adventure, you live it. Franchises like Tomb Raider and Uncharted have built entire worlds upon the foundations of these temple myths. Lara Croft's journey from aristocrat to adventurer is a path paved with forgotten ruins and divine artifacts. Her exploration of lost kingdoms in Siberia, or her confrontation with the supernatural power of the divine source in Rise of the Tomb Raider, are modern-day echoes of the quest for the lost knowledge of Göbekli Tepe or the living energy of the Jagannath idols. The gameplay itself is a digital pilgrimage, the act of solving environmental puzzles, deciphering ancient languages carved onto walls, and navigating treacherous, crumbling architecture mirrors the intellectual and physical challenges a real-life explorer might face. When you, as the player, carefully align stone mechanisms to open a hidden door or use a torch to reveal faded murals that hold the key to progress, you are participating in a ritualized form of the very discovery we've been discussing. The temples in these games are never just backdrops, they are active, breathing characters, much like the whispering stones of Angkor Wat or the singing chambers of Malta's Hypogeum, presenting challenges that are as much about understanding a lost culture's mind as they are about physical agility. What is so compelling about this modern repackaging is how it simplifies the complex spiritual stakes of the original myths into a clear, thrilling narrative of good versus evil, or order versus chaos. In the original myths, the curse is often a nuanced karmic consequence or divine response to impurity. In Indiana Jones, it becomes a spectacular, visceral light show that unequivocally destroys the villains. The labyrinth, which in a place like Chartres Cathedral was a profound map for spiritual transformation, becomes in a game like Uncharted a thrilling, death-defying parkour course. Nathan Drake's quippy, everyman persona as he scales impossible cliffsides makes the awe-inspiring scale of these ancient wonders accessible and relatable. He translates the overwhelming silence of a place like Palenque into a personal, action-packed mystery. This adaptation does not diminish the original power of the myths, instead it democratizes it. It takes concepts that were once the domain of priests, kings, and scholars and delivers them to a global audience on a colossal scale, ensuring that the core ideas, the danger of hubris, the allure of the unknown, the respect for sacred spaces, continue to resonate with millions. The enduring appeal of this genre, from the silver screen to the gaming console, speaks to a fundamental human wiring. We are, at our core, explorers and pattern seekers. These modern stories tap into that innate desire for discovery, offering a safe, vicarious way to experience the thrill of uncovering a lost world without the very real perils of a collapsing tunnel or a vengeful spirit. They validate the sense of wonder we feel when standing before a real ancient monument, giving it a narrative structure we can understand and enjoy. The success of Indiana Jones dodging a giant boulder or Lara Croft outwitting an ancient trap reaffirms a deeply held, if subconscious, belief that these places were meant to be solved, that they hold secrets waiting for a worthy individual to uncover them. In our modern, mapped-out world where few physical frontiers remain, these fictional temples become the final uncharted territory, the last repositories of mystery. They prove that the temple myth is a timeless story engine, one that continues to captivate us because it promises that just beyond the known world, behind a hidden door or beneath a forgotten stone, there still lies the potential for a miracle, a revelation, or a power that can change everything. And so, this incredible journey through 25 of history's most captivating temple myths draws to a close. From the divine whispers of Angkor Wat to the sonic terror of Chichen Itza, from the living idols of Puri to the contending spirits beneath St. Peter's, we have ventured far beyond the postcard views and into the very soul of these sacred spaces. Yet, the ultimate question remains, does it truly matter whether a single one of these stories is factually, historically true? Perhaps not in the way we typically measure reality. Their real power lies not in their historical accuracy, but in their profound psychological and cultural truth. These myths are not failures of history, they are triumphs of the human imagination, essential narratives we have crafted to explain the unexplainable, to give voice to the silent awe we feel when standing before an achievement that seems to defy human capability. They are the language we use to converse with the divine, to understand our place in a vast and mysterious cosmos, and to impose meaning upon the relentless passage of time. The recurring themes are impossible to ignore: the protective curse, the divine architect, the guardian spirit, the hidden knowledge. These are not random inventions, they are fundamental archetypes deeply embedded in our collective consciousness that emerge again and again wherever humanity encounters something truly sacred. They reveal our universal longing for a world that is more magical, more intentional, and more connected than the one we perceive with our everyday senses. They tell us that we are, and always have been, a species of storytellers, and that our greatest monuments are not just made of stone, but of the powerful myths that give them enduring life. The true mystery, then, is not necessarily locked within the stones themselves, but within us, in our innate need to believe that there is more to our existence than what we can see and touch, and that the past holds secrets that, if uncovered, could unlock a deeper understanding of who we are. This exploration has been an invitation to see these hallowed grounds not as dead ruins, but as living repositories of human wonder. Each myth, whether a whisper on the wind or a curse written in gold, adds another layer of richness to our shared heritage, reminding us that history is not a single, dry narrative, but a multi-layered tapestry woven from faith, fear, ambition, and an insatiable curiosity about the world beyond our own. We sincerely hope this journey has inspired you to look at these ancient wonders with fresh eyes and a rekindled sense of wonder. Now we want to hear from you. The world is full of mysterious places, each with its own untold stories. Have you ever visited a temple, a ruin, or a sacred site where you felt an inexplicable presence, heard a local legend that sent a shiver down your spine, or experienced something you simply couldn't explain? Which of these 25 myths resonated with you the most? Was it the eternal flame of Rome, the living consciousness of the planet at Delphi, or the modern miracle at Kedarnath? Share your own stories and thoughts in the comments below. Let's continue this conversation and build a community of curious explorers. If you enjoyed this deep dive into history's greatest enigmas, please show your support by subscribing to the channel and hitting the notification bell. There are countless more mysteries waiting to be uncovered, from lost civilizations and unexplained artifacts to the hidden codes of ancient manuscripts, and we can't wait to share them all with you. Thank you for joining us on this unforgettable expedition into the shadows of history. Until next time, keep